Good afternoon. Bon après-midi, bienvenue à tous et à toutes. I will probably play a little bit of Italian welcoming flexibility. In the meantime, we make sure that our keynote speaker is properly connected. So my speaking time will fluctuate depending on that. It is really a pleasure, an honor for me to welcome you at this Jacques Delors conference that is somehow a special event for the College of Europe community. Would like to welcome all our students, faculty, staff, across the departments and campuses. It's great to see the college community coming together in such a remarkable way. I think it's probably the first time since I started that I see this cross-campus and cross-departmental working together. It is, I guess, the blessing of Jacques Delors helping us in this endeavor, but also the determination and the great work of the EG, and all the colleagues and Didier for having put this together. So welcome to all of you on site here in Bruges, online, to this extraordinary conference that is also for us a special occasion to celebrate our patron de promotion, but also our 75th anniversary as a College of Europe. I will say just a few words about Jacques Delors, also because I am one of the few that will speak during these 2 days that have never met him. You might be surprised, but I never worked with him. I never met him. So I have observed his work. I have obviously tried to learn from his lessons. I've admired the legacy, but I've never known the man. And I know that during these 2 days, we will have a lot of insights on his work, on his life, on his legacy. So I would like to focus for a few minutes on what I believe connects Jacques Delors with our community, with the College of Europe. And that is a lot. That is a lot, not only because the promotion of this year brings his name, but also and mainly because of 3 things. One is the fact that he has been chairing, presiding over the Administrative Council of the College of Europe between 1995 and the year 2000. And by the way, those were the years when he also founded the think tank, the Institute Notre Europe, Jacques Delors Institute, that Enrico, our keynote speaker today, chairs. So there is a connection that still is valid today. So he has been involved in the College of Europe work at the highest possible level, being the president of our Administrative Council. He has inaugurated, he has opened somehow the Natolin campus exactly 30 years ago. But I think there is another reason why Jacques Delors and the College of Europe are strongly connected, and that's probably the attitude towards the European integration process. This is a personal guess to be tested against the findings of those that have studied his work more closely. My impression is that his vision of the European integration process has always been based on a very courageous and open-minded attitude, never with the spirit of administrating what was there, but always trying to find new ways, new avenues to face the new challenges as they were coming up. And if we look at Europe, I believe there's clearly avant Delors et après Delors. The face of the European Union, of the European integration nature even, has profoundly changed with him. And I think the impression I always got was that he has done that through a process of looking for what was possible. And normally in politics or institutions, we believe that the attitude of going to what is possible, the art of what is possible, is somehow something that diminishes the scope of what can be done. Actually, if you think of it, a lot of things are possible. And sometimes we miss the courage or the creativity to deliver what is possible, but is conceived to be as too difficult. My impression is that he was daring to try to put in place, and actually he did put in place many things that were possible, but were not considered likely to happen. And this jump somehow, I think, is something that is probably speaking to us very much in these times, where the European Union is definitely confronting a situation where it needs to dare what is possible, but that probably not conventionally accepted or thinkable. This is the impression I always had of his work, always trying to find something new, expand, respond to challenges with a creative, daring attitude, but always very realistic and grounded on what was actually deliverable in the situation that was there, and shaping the integration process rather than following what was established before. So with a strong innovation pattern that I believe, I hope, is also what inspires us all in joining the college community, in trying to find new avenues for bringing the process of integration forward. I'm now looking for signs. Yes, I think Enrico LETTA, our keynote speaker today, is connected. So I have. It is very much a pleasure for me, but also a little bit weird to introduce him to you. He needs no introduction and no presentation, but I will still say a few words before giving him the floor. First of all, thanking him. Here you are. We see you, Enrico. Thanks for joining. And really, I mean it. Thank you for joining, because I think we're all looking forward very much to hearing your words. Enrico LETTA has been Prime Minister of Italy in 2013-2014, is currently the President of the Institute Jacques Delors, and has last year produced the Much More Than a Market report on the future of the EU single market commissioned by the European Council. That, by the way, he has presented both here in Bruges and in Natolin last year with the students of the previous cohort, and that was also an honor for our community. Apart from that, I have to share a secret with you. Enrico and I are friends. Our children actually went to school together, so it dates many years ago. So it is also with a little bit of emotion and a lot of gratitude and personal gratitude that I introduce you to our audience today. Enrico, grazie for joining us, and the word is yours.
Thank you very much, Federica. Thank you very much for these kind words, but also thank you very much for the decision to have this moment today and all the celebrations for this centennial anniversary of Jacques Delors this year. We all, the friends of the Jacques Delors Institute family, we are so pleased that you decided to have this moment. And I can tell you that I was very sensitive to the fact that when I visited Natolin during the tour d'Europe that I had for the preparation of my report on the future of the single market, for me it was such an emotion to see the pictures with the inauguration by Jacques Delors himself, as you mentioned, of this fantastic facility close to Warsaw. That was for me a place, very interesting discussion on the report, as I had a very interesting evening in Bruges. I hope to visit Tirana soon. If you invite me, I will be more than happy to be there too.
You're already invited.
So thank you very much for this event. I saw the program. You organized a terrific program, really fantastic. I saw there great protagonists of these years and people that It will tell you secrets or secret stories, but also good ideas for the future. I use my time by trying to create a bridge between Delors of the past and what is happening today and what can be the future of the European Union. Because Delors today, in reality, is living in our activities, in our fight, in our reflections on how to complete the single market, this same single market that he created, and it is today the most important achievement of the European Union. The single currency is I would say, the ultimate achievement of the single market, and this is the true core of the European Union. And I would like to start my reflections by telling you how, for me, was crucial, decisive, sort of engine of new energies. The last meeting I had with Jacques Delors before starting my work as a rapporteur on the future of the single market. The European Council under the Belgian presidency and the Spanish presidency gave me this mandate during the summer 23rd, and I immediately asked Jacques Delors for a rendezvous. We used to meet in his apartment dans le quartier latin in Paris in the years in which I was president of the Jacques Delors Institute while Jacques Delors was still alive. We met several times because he wanted to know about the activities of the Institute, and he wanted always to give suggestions, ideas, and always to give kind words and warm boost, if I may say, for our activities. And I had the privilege to have all these meetings during the years. With him, of course, my curiosity to know stories about the period in which he was fighting every month with Margaret Thatcher to make the European Union stronger and more integrated, having on the other side someone who had exactly the opposite mood. And so curiosity, episodes. And I can tell you that this last meeting with him in September 23 was for me decisive for the way in which I organized the report on the single market. You can find fingerprints of that in the report and in the book I wrote around the report dedicated to Jacques Delors. Because in this meeting, of course, my first and most important mission of this meeting was to tell him that this mandate was because of him, the creator, the founder of the single market. And the leaders of the European Union were trying to find new ideas starting from the sources. And he is the source. He was the source of everything. And so he was happy, of course, but he immediately told me something very operational and very wise, very, very wise. Because first thing he told me, please do not write this report closing yourself in a bureau at the Berlaymont in Brussels. I can tell you that it was the, I would say, most important suggestion I received, because he told me, you have to visit the countries, you have to go everywhere for a very simple reason. The single market is not just a market. The single market is the people of Europe. So you have to meet the people. If you don't meet the people, there's no single market future. it was fantastic. And I can tell you that I have to admit that even the title, Much More Than a Market, comes from this suggestion. It is not just the market, it is much more than that. It's the people of Europe. Second, it was the consequence of this first suggestion, told me, but when you travel and when you go everywhere in the European, in the member states and in the capitals, don't limit yourself to visit the capitals. Of course, it will be already a great achievement if you are ready and if you are able to visit the 27 capitals. But in the capitals, he told me that you will meet diplomats, officials. They will tell you also fantastic stories, but these stories will be always a little bit biased. You have to meet, once again, the people. Because if you meet people, and people are not in the capitals, people are in provinces. This is why this journey was around Europe in the provinces, 65 cities. That means not only the capitals. Because of his idea, and I think his idea, gives you the idea of the kind of politician and the kind of homme d'etat was Jacques Delors, with this idea of the citizens, people on the ground, this idea of citizenship that was really in his heart. Jacques Delors is famous because he created the single market, but also because he created the profile, the dimension of the European citizen. And the European citizen is the consequence of the single market as freedom of movement of people, not only goods, services, and capitals. But he gave me a third suggestion that is for me a fundamental lesson, and I would like to give you this lesson and leave you this lesson from Jacques Delors as one of the most important part of the values, the European values, and the framework of the European set of values. He told me the single market, when I, Jacques Delors, created the single market in the end of the 80s, was a success because at the same time I created the structural funds, the cohesion policies. Why? Because the single market is a fantastic tool to boost competitiveness because it gives a larger market, it eliminates barriers, tariffs, it allows freedom of exchanges, it helps, I would say, the protagonism of enterprises, actors, producers, traders, and the single market has a fantastic boost for competitiveness. But it is also true that the single market is it can be also something that without cohesion policies aside can create some inequalities because regions that are poorer risk to be poorer because the big companies will be from biggest regions and they will become richer having a larger single market. So the need to have cohesion policies aside. And I can tell you that these three suggestions were for me fundamental, but in general, and this is exactly what I tried to put in the report, there's a chapter in the report in which I exactly try to implement and to develop this idea of Jacques Delors of single market and cohesion policy is the idea of the freedom to stay, is the possibility to consider that the single market gives us the freedom to move, and the freedom to move as all the different freedoms is fantastic, gives us the possibility to be true citizens. But it is true too that not only the European citizens want to move, and we have to be aware and we have to be aware of the fact that part of our people, they, I would say, rightly consider themselves as citizens of their piece of land. They want to stay there, and we have to beware because the key point is, if the single market becomes only, I would say, a set of opportunities for those who are cosmopolitan, mobile, language speaking, or with the goodwill to work in another country, the single market is perceived as an opportunity only for one part of the society. And that was the other great idea of Jacques Delors as a politician. He was always very simple. He was always sencillo, as the Spaniards say, very, I would say, able to talk and to discuss with every citizen, able to discuss with all the different protagonists of our economy and the part of our societies, with the idea that the citizen was the center of everything, and the representative of the institutions needed to be able to give solutions for the good of the citizens. And these solutions needed to be solutions working, not slogans. That was another great lesson that personally I received from Jacques Delors, but that is the other big profile. I want to speak of Jacques Delors and not of me, but the key point, Jacques Delors was someone who was fantastic in combining values. He was man of values. He was man of values. He was able to say no in the name of the values of the European integration. I can tell you that today is more and more necessary to have women and men able to say no in the name of the European values. In any position, not only if you have to become minister or prime minister of your country, but also if you have to become someone working in the public administration of your country, of the European Union. The need to know that the values, the European values, they are there, they are forever, and we have to defend them, and we have to be able to say no if it is necessary. And that was one of the big lessons of Jacques Delors, man of values. And at the same time, I use this term that can seem a little bit strange. He was fantastic using the screwdriver. The screwdriver was really, I would say, a sort of magic one in his hands, because he succeeded on many great achievements of the European Union. Even the single market is screwdriver success, but also all the other big successes of the period of Jacques Delors. Erasmus, of course, is one of them. It maybe is the most famous of them. Was because of the screwdriver. What does it mean, screwdriver? That means considering that without big slogans, without big advertising, without big communication, knowing well where to put the screwdriver and how to work on one detail, on one law, on one comma, could be decisive to be successful in some of the most important issues that are crucial for daily life of people, of students, of entrepreneurs, of traders. And I have to say that this ability of Delors was also his ability to someone who was able to consider that. I would like to leave you with this final image. Jacques Delors and Margaret Thatcher were the two great enemies of this period. They were fighting, they were struggling, but they were respecting each other very much. respect, politics as respect. And Thatcher respected him too. He respected Thatcher. But at the same time, if we have the single market today, it's because of both. And I want to say that in a period in which polarization is the, I would say, the mantra of present political situation, in which when you have an enemy, you have to destroy this enemy with all means. And that was not the case in that period, where if we have the single market today is because of the cooperation among two enemies. And these two enemies and other enemies that were around the European Council table considered themselves as part of a common, I would say, journey. And it was a win-win. The single market was a win-win. Thatcher wanted the single market for some aspects: liberalization, free market, competitiveness. Jacques Delors wanted the single market, first of all, because of integration. It was the best way to integrate countries, integrating people, integrating goods, capital, services, regions, and it was a great success, the most powerful integration boost of the European Union. So I strongly believe that all these aspects of men of value, very respectful, able to consider that even your, I would say, worst enemy, you have to work with her or with him, because we are part of the same political institutional landscape, and in Europe more than ever. And so considering the European Council as a battlefield is, I think, the worst decision, is a place where we have to create compromises. And you, for your track today, in your journey, in learning how to become pillars of the European institutions, I think all these messages coming from the great founder of modern European Union is really the heart of everything. And I'm sure that you will consider in a different way after today's discussion the role of screwdriver. A screwdriver is a great tool. It's not just something I would say poorer than other most important tool. It's a great tool, and this ability of Jacques Delors to, I would say, to live with values and to be able to work with the screwdriver in the right places with this great mission in mind, with also the need to have the steps one by one to get the result. If we are all here, is because of Jacques Delors, and we have really to thank him. And this is what we do daily with the Jacques Delors Institute, with our institutes in Berlin and Brussels too, and all the other institutions that are working daily in the name of Jacques Delors. And I'm sure that his inspiration will be fundamental for you and for your future. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Madam Rector, dear colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, so before I talk about the format of this colloquium and remind you a few minimal rules to follow, I would like to say that I'm very honored that the Rector and the College have really entrusted me with the task of coordinating the content of this event. It is the mission of the European General Studies program to contribute to the existence of a cross-cutting pillar within the college, at least occasionally. And I'm particularly pleased to be contributing to this in this context of these events of the 75th anniversary, and especially concerning the figure of Jacques Delors. Donc, Jacques Delors est le parrain de la promotion actuelle du collège, et il fut, comme la rectrice l'a rappelé, le président du conseil d'administration du collège. Il fut le grand Européen que l'on sait, mais aussi un grand enseignant, ce qu'on sait moins et qui nous sera rappelé tout à l'heure. Quelqu'un qui, en amont et en aval de sa carrière plus directement politique, a toujours travaillé à mettre en relation le monde des idées, des clubs, des think tanks par la suite, et le monde de l'administration et de l'action publique. J'espère que cette formule d'un colloque de réflexion sur Jacques Delors, l'Européen, contribuera à rendre un hommage en actes à ces différentes facettes. Compte tenu de son statut d'ancien président du conseil d'administration, ce colloque a été délibérément conçu comme un colloque qui valorise l'expertise interne du collège, fait communiquer ces départements et ces campus dans une réflexion commune et pluridisciplinaire sur son bilan 30 ans après son départ de la Commission européenne, et aussi associe les assistants académiques et les étudiants pour traiter de cet héritage depuis le regard de la jeune génération. La seule exception à cette dimension interne est la délégation de l'ancienne École nationale d'administration, l'autre école de Delors que j'ai le vif plaisir d'accueillir, l'Institut national du service public, qui est donc le nouveau nom de l'ENA, a réalisé l'année dernière un colloque absolument remarquable sur Jacques Delors, et je vous conseille d'ailleurs de visionner la captation qui est sur YouTube et le livre à venir dont vous serez informés. Il m'a semblé que nous devions travailler en complément les uns les autres, et j'espère que cette première collaboration informelle entre les deux institutions se prolongera par d'autres. Mais j'aimerais aussi dire, et peut-être confesser, que ce colloque revêt un aspect plus personnel. J'ai beaucoup croisé Jacques Delors à distance en tant que chercheur, en m'interrogeant sur l'après-Delors, sur la question de la reproduction de son héritage, sur aussi son leadership et ce que j'ai appelé le mystère du charisme delorien. Je ne sais pas si le jeu de lumière est lié à ce concept, mais merci pour l'intention. Mais comme plusieurs d'entre nous aujourd'hui, j'ai aussi eu la chance immense de le rencontrer. C'était en 2005-2006, lors d'une de ses visites à Sciences Po Strasbourg, lorsque j'étais l'encore jeune directeur du master de politique européenne et du laboratoire de sociologie politique européenne. C'était aussi un lieu symbolique chez Yvonne, c'est-à-dire la Weinstube, où Helmut Kohl et François Mitterrand étaient réputés se rencontrer. Nous étions 4, lui, le regretté directeur de Sciences Po, mon épouse et moi. Nous sommes restés longtemps à table et je ne l'oublierai jamais. D'abord parce que l'homme s'est révélé tout autre chose que la personnalité austère que j'avais en tête. Nous avons discuté à bâton rompu, il nous a livré une série de réflexions sur ses regrets politiques français et européens, sur ses espoirs aussi et ceux qu'il nourrissait pour sa fille, ou encore sur sa relation à la sociologie politique dont il se disait un grand lecteur. J'aimerais seulement ici vous livrer et peut-être transmettre deux de ces réflexions ce soir-là. La première sur son attachement à la formation à l'Europe. Il souhaitait qu'on l'enseigne davantage à l'ENA et pour lui, le collège représentait véritablement un modèle. Il avait bien mesuré combien le collège était un lieu unique, une véritable antichambre de la politique européenne. Il considérait que la dimension européenne de son recrutement et de son bilinguisme en faisait la force singulière, mais aussi qu'il faudrait à l'avenir l'ouvrir à la réflexion sur les relations entre les sociétés et la construction européenne qui le préoccupait. Et je me retrouve ici tout à fait dans ce que disait Enrico LETTA tout à l'heure sur son intérêt pour les gens, en effet. Et à ce moment, et ceux qui l'ont croisé imagineront sans doute la scène, avec son regard à la fois rieur et vif, il ajouta « Avec ce que vous faites, vous devriez penser à enseigner au collège ». Et puis, il a souhaité me parler de Pierre Bourdieu, que je n'avais pas évoqué, mais dont je sais qu'ils se sont rencontrés à plusieurs reprises. Et Jacques Delors me tint à peu près ce langage. Bourdieu n'est pas facile, il lui arrive d'être dur, mais je dois vous confier quelque chose. Beaucoup d'académiques sont en réalité soumis ou fascinés par les politiques, vous n'imaginez pas. On les invite dans son avion et quand on lit leur article, on lit quasiment sans filtre ce qu'on leur a raconté. Bourdieu n'est pas de cela. Oui, il est parfois très critique, mais quand je le lis, je sais que c'est bien lui que je lis et il me fait réfléchir. Pour cette raison, c'est finalement l'intellectuel que je respecte le plus. Bon, je n'ai jamais cherché à aller plus loin, mais ces conseils me sont revenus à sa mort et j'ai pensé que nous lui devions précisément quelque chose d'académique, c'est-à-dire à la fois de réflexif, mais aussi franc, un colloque qui soit un colloque de référence, mais qui ne soit pas nécessairement un colloque de révérence, et encore moins révérencieux. Pour mémoire, lors de son hommage national dans la cour des Invalides à Paris, son cercueil est parti sur un air de jazz, et je pense que ce ne fut pas tout à fait au hasard. So you now understand better this event's philosophy, and I thank my authority, my dear colleagues and friends, the students and the college administrative team, including my dear EG team. So the EG team and I, we are at your disposal. As you see, we choose not to use paper for the program, which you will find on this QR code, and then directly on your computer or device. Just to conclude, you have noticed that we have an intense program and courageous academic assistants to chair the panels. So please assist them in their task of keeping to time. We have 20-minute max, followed by 5 minutes of punctual question before the Q&A at the end of the day. The more you help you chair, the more time we have for the discussion. So thank you again to everybody, and let's start the colloquium.
Merci Madame la Rectrice, merci au département des études générales, bonjour à tous et bienvenue donc dans ce premier panel intitulé Jacques Delors, l'Européen vu de France. Ce panel à 3 voix présentera les intervenants à ma droite, à savoir Madame Céline HUSSON-ROCHCONGAR qui est directrice de la recherche à l'Institut national du service public, Monsieur Michel MANGENOT qui est directeur de l'Institut des études européennes à l'Université Paris 8 et Monsieur Fabrice LARAT qui est enseignant-chercheur et au sein de la direction de la recherche de l'Institut national du service public. La présentation à 3 voix en français que vous vous apprêtez à suivre s'inscrit, comme l'a dit le professeur GEORGAKAKIS, dans le cadre de la publication prochaine d'un ouvrage consacré à Jacques Delors, réalisé au sein de l'INSP, Recherche de la documentation française. Dans la première intervention d'aujourd'hui, Madame HUSSON-ROCHCONGAR nous présentera un aspect très important mais assez méconnue de la biographie de Jacques Delors, à savoir son rôle de formateur au sein de l'ENA. Elle analysera comment ces enseignements dans les années 1960 et 1970 ont nourri sa pensée économique et sociale et ont marqué sa transition d'un haut fonctionnaire à l'homme politique que nous connaissons. Ensuite, M. Michel MANGENOT mettra en lumière les paradoxes de la figure de Jacques Delors, célébré en Europe, mais demeuré sans véritable héritage en France. Et il reviendra également sur le moment Delors, sur son rôle en tant que président de la Commission européenne, ainsi que sur les équilibres institutionnels qui ont marqué son action. Enfin, M. Fabrice LARAT nous parlera du non-conformisme intellectuel de Jacques Delors, qui a donné la priorité à des think tanks et à des clubs plutôt qu'à l'engagement politique au sein d'un parti. Il nous parlera aussi de sa curiosité pour des thématiques émergentes et de l'influence déterminante du personnalisme communautaire de Emmanuel Mourier sur la vision du politique de Jacques Delors. Je vous remercie et je laisse la parole à nos intervenants.
Alors pour cette intervention à 3 voix, nous voulons d'abord remercier Madame la rectrice ainsi que Didier pour cette invitation à ce colloque. Comme ça a été indiqué, nous allons parler en français, non seulement parce que Jacques Delors était français, mais aussi parce que l'Europe de Jacques Delors dont nous allons parler parlait français, et que nous présentons donc un ouvrage qui vient d'être cité, que vous voyez ici projeté, apparaître au printemps la documentation française, que j'ai eu l'honneur de diriger avec Fabrice LARAT. Il est intitulé « Jacques Delors, les paradoxes d'un homme d'État européen ». Il paraîtra début avril à l'occasion du centenaire de sa naissance et au moment, 30 ans après son départ de la présidence de la Commission européenne. Alors, il est le fruit d'un colloque organisé le 25 mars 2024, co-organisé par l'Institut d'études européennes de Paris 8, que je dirige, et la direction de la recherche de l'Institut national du service public, et c'est la raison pour laquelle Céline HUSSON-ROCHCONGAR va intervenir.
Merci beaucoup, Michel. Merci beaucoup, Madame la rectrice. Cher Didier, j'espère pouvoir faire écho assez largement à vos propos introductifs en expliquant pourquoi l'Institut national du service public a souhaité rendre un hommage scientifique à Jacques Delors, au point d'organiser une journée d'études, Michel le rappelait, et de publier un ouvrage consacré à son parcours, à son héritage, mais peut-être avant tout à l'analyse de son style, de sa méthode, de son ambition, pas une ambition européenne, mais une ambition pour l'Europe, ce qui est assez différent. Pour vous le rappeler en quelques mots, l'INSP a succédé en janvier 2022 à l'ancienne École nationale d'administration, l'ENA, qui a formé 4 des 5 présidents de la Ve République, 9 de ses premiers ministres, des dizaines de ministres et bien plus encore de membres des cabinets. En France, c'est désormais l'opérateur de référence pour la formation des cadres dirigeants et supérieurs de l'État, qu'on veille à ne plus appeler hauts fonctionnaires comme s'il y avait de bas fonctionnaires, soit environ 25 000 décideurs publics. Dans un contexte accéléré de transformation des dispositifs de formation, on aurait pu penser que Delors et son projet européen ne seraient pas une priorité pour la direction de la recherche, parce que la principale mission de cette direction, c'est d'élaborer des outils scientifiques qui permettent de former des fonctionnaires de responsabilité capables de mettre en œuvre les transitions écologiques et numériques et de porter les valeurs du service public et de la démocratie dans les processus de transformation publique, financière et managériale contemporains. Dans un univers qui, depuis 1945, tournait résolument le dos à tous les aspects universitaires et académiques, c'est un assez gros chantier, un chantier qui surtout nécessite une approche transversale, qui saisit les grandes questions de l'action publique contemporaine comme un tout, de manière décloisonnée, parce que se donner les moyens de penser l'action publique, c'est accepter d'affronter sa complexité et de l'affronter au service du bien commun. Et c'est cette manière d'appréhender les choses qui a rendu si évident le fait d'associer la direction de la recherche de l'Institut national du service public à l'Institut d'études européennes pour rendre hommage à Jacques Delors, dont la trajectoire comme les réalisations montrent sans aucune équivoque cette attention à la complexité et cet objectif de toujours viser un bien commun. C'est aussi ce qui a orienté les recherches que j'ai menées à cette occasion à partir des anciennes archives de l'ENA pour chercher à en savoir plus sur les relations que Jacques Delors avait entretenues avec cette école, avec ses élèves, dont il a rappelé à de multiples reprises combien il les avait trouvés intelligents et avec un sens de l'engagement très fort, ce qui était plutôt à contre-courant d'un certain nombre d'auteurs et de politiques de l'époque, au point d'inciter sa fille Martine à tenter le concours d'entrée qu'elle a réussi en 73, promotion Léon Blum, et de recruter parmi ses anciens élèves celui qui jouera à ses côtés un rôle fondamental pendant de longues années, Pascal Lamy. Donc, plongeant dans les archives de l'école, j'ai découvert que Delors, sans avoir été lui-même élève, avait en revanche été professeur à l'ENA de 64 à 75 et qu'il y avait pendant ces 12 années assuré des enseignements de différentes natures au travers desquels j'ai vu se dessiner une évolution de sa pensée et de sa posture. De février 64 à 67, il a dispensé 3 cours assez classiques, disons, composés chacun de plusieurs leçons dont les thématiques étaient toutes directement liées, et c'est sans aucun doute pour ça qu'on avait fait appel à lui, à ses fonctions d'alors de chef de service des affaires sociales au commissariat général du plan. Il a travaillé sur la politique des revenus, la planification des équipements collectifs, l'approche des problèmes sociaux. Tous ces cours sont marqués par des préoccupations qu'on pourrait dire interventionnistes et une même recherche d'efficacité pour tenter de chiffrer les besoins sociaux au service d'une action publique réellement efficace sur ces questions. En 67, il prononce également devant les élèves une conférence consacrée à l'intégration des aspects sociaux dans le développement économique qui se fait annonciatrice d'une seconde période dédiée à l'encadrement de travaux moins académiques. En effet, en 68, puis en 74 et en 75, il supervise 3 rapports collectifs qui sont réalisés par des élèves dans le cadre de séminaires qui l'encadrent. Compte de la nation, indicateurs sociaux du développement, aspects quantitatifs et sociaux de la croissance, inflation et emploi salarié, on y lit à nouveau une très grande cohérence. Il s'agit de chercher à saisir toujours économiquement le social, en mobilisant la comparaison internationale de manière systématique, dans une recherche constante d'équilibre qui s'inscrit dans une perspective que je qualifierais de raisonnée et raisonnable, justifiée et visant un objectif. Toutefois, la méthode et l'objectif de ces enseignements évoluent manifestement. Alors, bien sûr, on y décèle l'affirmation progressive d'une spécificité méthodologique qui est liée à la professionnalisation de la formation, notamment sous la poussée des anciens élèves. Mais on y voit aussi un glissement dans la démarche de Delors lui-même, alors qu'il avait tout d'abord recours aux sciences économiques et sociales et à la comparaison pour exposer des faits. Progressivement, ses connaissances et ses convictions s'affermissent, selon moi, d'après ce que j'ai trouvé dans les archives, et il en vient par la suite à laisser tout à fait de côté la question de la scientificité pour encadrer des travaux plus prospectifs, comme si, sous la pression de ce qu'il considère comme une forme d'urgence politique à agir, il prenait acte du fait que la temporalité de l'action publique, et plus encore peut-être celle du politique, s'éloigne irrémédiablement de celle de la recherche. Dans cette évolution se dessine, je crois, la mue du haut fonctionnaire, dont la fonction est de servir l'État, même si son engagement syndical affleure avec évidence, en homme politique dont le rôle, et peut-être la mission, s'il l'envisage ainsi, est de proposer plutôt un projet de société, et en l'occurrence un projet qui dépasse l'État lui-même, un projet européen. Alors, c'est bien un haut fonctionnaire assumant des responsabilités syndicales qui assure tout d'abord des cours à l'ENA dans lesquels il cherche à décrire l'État. Et progressivement, en revanche, c'est un homme politique en devenir et celui, évidemment, c'est plus facile a posteriori, celui qui deviendra la figure européenne que l'on connaît, qui encadre un certain nombre de travaux grâce auxquels il tente manifestement d'explorer la société en s'appuyant sur l'aide qui lui est apportée par les élèves qui travaillent sous sa direction. Et il passe ainsi de la réflexion à l'action. Dans le contexte actuel de mise en place de l'Institut, où nous cherchons les moyens de passer à l'échelle, en matière de gouvernance écologique et numérique, grâce à des solutions nouvelles, et où c'est le rôle de la direction que j'ai l'honneur de diriger justement. C'est le rôle de ce service de proposer ce type de solution et de former les fonctionnaires de responsabilité de demain à trouver ces solutions nouvelles. Eh bien, dans ce contexte, cette évolution, son observation constitue évidemment une source d'inspiration pour nous parce qu'elle est un moyen de questionner ce que Alain Desrosières a appelé l'extériorité du savoir par rapport à l'action. C'est une occasion pour nous très féconde de penser les rapports entre le savant et le politique d'une manière différente.
Alors, je vais passer maintenant à l'explication du qualificatif « les paradoxes d'un homme d'État européen ». Dans le temps qui nous est imparti, je vais insister sur 5 paradoxes. Le premier, Delors entre dans la lumière médiatique nationale française, de la haute politique, pourrait-on dire, début 1994, alors qu'il est question de sa candidature à l'élection présidentielle française. Ce rendez-vous manqué a incontestablement contribué à la fabrication du mythe de l'homme qui ne voulait pas être roi, pour reprendre le titre d'une journaliste. Deuxième paradoxe, au niveau européen, le leadership de Delors a été reconnu et couronné à Bruxelles, à Berlin, à Madrid et dans de nombreuses capitales. Et avec Jean Monnet et Helmut Kohl, il est l'un des 3 seuls citoyens d'honneur de l'Europe distingués par le Conseil européen. Alors qu'en France, il reste sans véritable héritage et sans plus admiré en dehors de sa propre famille politique. Troisième paradoxe sur lequel j'insisterai plus, Delors a été vilipendé à Paris par une partie de la gauche, mais également une partie de la droite, comme étant un des pères du néolibéralisme à Bruxelles, alors qu'il est perçu à Londres comme l'homme de l'interventionnisme, et en particulier l'homme de l'État européen au sens d'un État fédéral. Donc ici, on a un choc de représentation qui est au fondement du mythe ou de la mythologie de Delors, et en la matière, 2 doctrines s'affrontent. La première est celle d'un Delors néolibéral, ce que Rawi Abdellal, l'économiste américain, a appelé l'un des pères du consensus de Paris qui a remplacé le consensus de Washington. Delors fait partie, avec 2 autres Français de gauche, un au FMI et un au l'OCDE, de ceux qui ont contribué à la libéralisation financière internationale. Mais l'autre thèse est celle d'un Delors resté planificateur, syndicaliste, qui a été entravé dans ses projets à Bruxelles, en particulier lors de son second livre blanc. Alors dans cet ouvrage, justement, nous tentons de développer un dépassement de cette querelle à travers quelques idées en termes d'apprentissage et d'ajustement de méthode. Apprentissage des réalités et de la dynamique communautaire pendant ces années au Parlement européen, de 1979 à 1981, où il préside la Commission économique et financière, analysée dans l'ouvrage par Étienne Deschamps. Ajustement de priorité. Si Delors a pu incontestablement hésiter entre la France ou l'Europe, sa synthèse qu'il va opérer à travers une nouvelle approche de la France par l'Europe, étudiée par Éric Bussière. Son projet européen est centré sur le marché et la monnaie, on l'a dit. Des éléments résiduels du planificateur subsistent également à Bruxelles, comme le montre Laurent Varlouzet. Enfin, la synthèse delorienne s'exprime pleinement dans ce qu'il a qualifié de son rêve absolu, le dialogue social européen. Donc il y a une forme de conversion à l'Europe, d'apprentissage de l'Europe, entre le Delors du plan et celui de 1979 ou du ministre de 1983, l'homme du tournant sous François Mitterrand, qui lui vaudra l'admiration d'Helmut Kohl, qui aura cette phrase à Mitterrand « J'accepte un Français à la tête de la Commission, à condition que ses initiales soient JD ». Quatrième paradoxe, Delors est resté dans la mémoire collective comme l'homme de Maastricht et de l'euro, alors que, comme on le sait, son traité préféré, selon ses propres termes, était l'acte unique de 1986. Là aussi, c'est une ironie de l'histoire. Le cinquième et ultime paradoxe de Jacques Delors réside dans la façon dont il a dénationalisé et européanisé la politique, pour reprendre une formule de Sylvain Kahn. S'il a été secondairement, ou peut-être malgré lui, un homme politique français, il a pleinement été un homme politique européen, ce que nous qualifions dans l'ouvrage d'un des rares hommes d'État européens, après Monnet et Hallstein. Il s'agit ici évidemment d'un oxymore, tant la qualité d'homme d'État est adaptée et réservée à la sphère nationale, qui rejoint le fameux oxymore de fédération d'États-nations qu'il a développé à la toute fin de sa carrière en novembre 1994. En conclusion, j'aimerais dire un mot sur ma contribution personnelle qui s'intitule « Le moment de l'or » sur lequel je terminerai. La notion de moment recouvre deux dimensions. Un moment historique, un temps donné, au sens de chronos, mais également une capacité à se saisir des opportunités dans le sens grec du kairos. Il y a eu ainsi incontestablement un moment Monnet de 1950 à 1954. Il y a eu ensuite un moment Hallstein de 1958 à 1964. Nous montrons ici qu'il y a également eu clairement un moment de l'or de 1985 à 1991. Pourquoi que de 1985 à 1991? Car en 90-91, les équilibres réussis de la première configuration de l'or se rompent à partir de la CIG sur l'union politique de Maastricht. La capacité de jouer du kairos s'affaiblit. Il est en quelque sorte déséquilibré en termes de gouvernance. Pour reprendre une métaphore de Pierre Bourdieu citée tout à l'heure par Didier, il est en quelque sorte déséquilibré entre sa main droite, Pascal Lamy, et sa main gauche, François Lamoureux. Il perd la maîtrise du jeu avec l'irruption de la géopolitique en 1990 et l'absence de réforme interne de la Commission. Enfin, c'est la revanche du Quai d'Orsay qui lui fera perdre le soutien de Paris.
Les paradoxes apparents que Michel MANGENOT vient d'évoquer sont en grande partie dus à l'existence chez Jacques Delors de particularités qui le distinguaient du reste de la classe politico-administrative française. Donc, je vais donc, quant à moi, vous présenter ce qui fait l'originalité de Jacques Delors et ce que l'on peut résumer au travers de l'expression « une pensée en action ». À l'occasion de son décès, plusieurs témoins ont rappelé à quel point il était un homme de projet pour lequel la politique n'était qu'un moyen et pas un but en soi, et que là, notamment, était sa différence. C'est Pascal Lamy qui souligne à ce sujet que Delors avait développé, je cite, une capacité d'écoute qui différencie l'intellectuel autodidacte qu'il était d'un intellectuel sorti d'une grande école. Il en a tiré sa méthode, un tiers d'écoute, un tiers d'ingénierie, c'est-à-dire de mise en œuvre, et un tiers de pédagogie, avec une incroyable simplicité dans son expression, acquise dans le syndicalisme. C'est entre autres cette particularité et le fait qu'il ait toujours refusé d'être prisonnier de l'idéologie qui explique pourquoi Delors a systématiquement privilégié l'engagement dans des clubs et des think tanks comme notre Europe par rapport au militantisme au sein d'un parti politique. Une autre caractéristique était son ouverture sur le monde et sa curiosité intellectuelle, qualités qui vont de pair avec son attachement à la formation tout au long de la vie et son souci de bien comprendre le réel pour pouvoir mieux agir et avoir prise sur lui. Dans le cadre des clubs, tout comme de ses activités professionnelles, il a mobilisé des études techniques, des travaux académiques, et lors de ses mandats à la tête de la commission, il a cherché le dialogue avec les universitaires et des membres de la société civile pour débattre des grandes questions qui font et qui feront l'Europe. C'est ainsi qu'en 1989, il a créé la cellule de prospective, dans un moment historique où on pressentait de profonds changements. Cette structure directement rattachée au président devait permettre de mieux suivre et d'anticiper le mouvement de l'intégration européenne en portant l'attention sur les perspectives de long terme et sur les tendances structurelles. Et la création en 1993 des carrefours de la science et de la culture s'inscrit dans la même logique. À ses yeux, la fonction de ces carrefours était de constituer un moment privilégié de dialogue entre les responsables politiques de la Commission et les porteurs d'idées pour l'Europe ou en Europe, en fournissant un éclairage original sur tel ou tel point d'intérêt européen. C'est cette ouverture d'esprit qui l'a également rendu sensible à des thématiques émergentes tout au long de sa carrière, comme les phénomènes de décrochement industriel ou politique, l'angoisse du déclassement social ou les illusions de la société de consommation. Dès 1972, il s'est intéressé aux travaux du Club de Rome et fit une proposition controversée de texte au Parti socialiste français intitulée « Halte à la croissance ». Et en 1993, vous le savez peut-être, dans le livre blanc, il proposa sans succès d'instituer une taxe carbone au niveau européen. La raison pour cela est à trouver dans le rôle que Delors attribuait aux idées dans l'action. C'est ce qu'il résumait au travers de l'objectif, mettre la société en mouvement. Ce qui voulait dire pour lui créer les conditions d'un sentiment d'appartenance, mais aussi vouloir la possibilité pour une majorité de citoyens, les gens qu'évoquait Enrico LETTA, de trouver leur place personnelle dans un dessein plus global. Une clé de lecture essentielle pour comprendre tout cela est son attachement au mouvement d'idées que fut le personnalisme communautaire fondé par le philosophe chrétien Emmanuel Mounier et qui constitue le fil conducteur de son itinéraire tout entier, de ses débuts à la Banque de France jusqu'à la présidence de la Commission. Ce fut tout à la fois une source d'inspiration, une boussole éthique et sa marque de fabrique. Jacques Delors le proclamait dès le début de son premier ouvrage, paru en 1974, Emmanuel Mounier fut son seul maître à penser. Le 17 octobre 1989, ici même, à l'occasion du 40e anniversaire du collège, Delors saisit l'opportunité offerte par le choix des étudiants de placer leur nom de promotion sous le patronage de Denis de Rougemont pour rappeler ce qui l'attachait à cette personnalité européenne qui fut également un compagnon de route d'Emmanuel Mounier. Plusieurs idées directrices de Delors montrent à quel point sa vision du monde était marquée par cette philosophie personnaliste. Outre l'importance qu'il attachait au spirituel, il s'agit tout d'abord des triptyques dignité de la personne, responsabilité et engagement, ainsi que l'importance de la communauté, de la fraternité et de la solidarité. À cela s'ajoute l'attachement au réalisme et l'effort de compréhension du monde pour pouvoir avoir prise sur lui. Dans le prolongement de Mounier, Delors affirmait que toute pensée doit être un engagement car elle naît des actes que la personne pose, des hommes qu'elle fréquente et elle provoque certaines attitudes et actes. Dans son discours de Bruges, il explique ainsi comment il essaye d'utiliser l'apport intellectuel et politique de Didier Rougemont, citant à ce sujet son attachement au principe de subsidiarité. Il en va de même avec l'idée exprimée dans le livre blanc, comme quoi lutter contre la misère ne serait pas uniquement l'affaire des États, mais aussi celle de la mise en œuvre, je cite, d'une solidarité de voisinage par chaque citoyen. C'est une idée qui figure parmi les principes fondateurs du mouvement personnaliste La Vie Nouvelle, dans lequel il a milité pendant des années avec sa femme. Le style Jacques Delors, tel qu'il est perçu par les commentateurs, est fortement marqué par cette empreinte personnaliste, quand il résume par exemple sa méthode à une lecture précise des choses et des problèmes et en même temps à une conception de l'action politique dans ses aspects pratiques et une façon de mener l'action plutôt que de rester sur des considérations institutionnelles. De fait, son éthique consistait à savoir comment situer la morale aussi bien dans la vie collective comme dans le gouvernement des hommes et l'administration des choses. Voilà ce que montrent les analyses contenues dans cet ouvrage. Et de manière intéressante, c'est aussi ce qui ressort de l'étude que nous avons pu mener des quelques 280 publications produites par Jacques Delors des années 50 jusqu'à la fin de sa vie et qui reflètent très bien la continuité et la fidélité de ses engagements, mais aussi leur originalité. Je vous remercie.
Thank you to our first three panelists. I will continue. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next two panelists presenting their insights on Delors, the European viewed from Germany. It is my pleasure to first introduce Hartmut Marhold on my very left side. honorary professor at the University of Cologne, as well as a senior research fellow at the Centre International de Formation Européenne, where he also served as a Director General from 2002 until 2013. He is currently teaching at the Turkish-German University in Istanbul, as well as researching, amongst other topics, the history of European integration and the German view on European politics, with a special research focus on the institutional and constitutional developments of the EU, as well as federalism. He will today share his insights on the relevance of Jacques Delors for German history and politics, with a specific focus on his role for German reunification, as well as his affinity with German political culture. Our second speaker is Wolfgang WESSELS, who will share his insights on Jacques Delors as a leader of Europe. But I would first like to just present some elements of his very long and impressive CV that are most relevant for the culture of Europe, because we are very happy to say that he has served as the director of the Department of Political and Administrative Studies in Bruges for more than 15 years, and since then has continued to be with us as a visiting professor at the Culture of Europe, both in Bruges and Natolin. In 2011, he was also awarded the ad personam Jean Monnet Chair for his achievements in European studies. His research interests focus on the role of the European Council, as well as relations between the EU and Turkey. And he will, as I already mentioned, share with us today the legacy of Jacques Delors as a European leader, as well as his impact on the development of the European Council. So it's now my pleasure to give the floor to the speakers. Hartmut Marhold, the floor is yours.
who could bridge many different gaps between the Europeans at the time. I would like to select two events and one more structural connection Jacques Delors was able to provide for Europe. The first one was his selection, his nomination as President of the European Commission in 1984. It was the turn for a new President of the Commission. And normally, an informal rule, it would have to be a German to assume this task. The first president of the Commission, Hallstein, was a German, and then all the others had their president. And it was now another German who should follow this series of other presidents of the Commission. Helmut Kohl had the ingenious idea to let it be a Frenchman. Somebody mentioned already the event at the summit in Fontainebleau in 1984. Kohl told to Jacques Delors, I would accept that it is a French president of the Commission who assumes this task over the next years, and not a German, under one condition. It must be you. Tell it to your president, Mitterrand. The Franco-German relations at the time were uneasy. Mitterrand had started with a communist socialist project which had put France over a year into a mess in economic and financial terms, and was totally out of tune with the tide of the time, which was neoliberal, or at least conservative. Think of Ronald Reagan, of Margaret Thatcher, and even in Germany, a conservative liberal government had taken over. It was difficult to bridge this gap between France, despite the U-turn Mitterrand had operated in 1983, and Germany. Delors was the only man who could do this. Delors was the guarantor of France's membership in the European monetary system. Delors was the guarantor of a balance between a regulatory policy focusing on market on the one hand and on regulation, on solidarity on the other hand. We had this as well. So he was the man who could confirm, who could continue, who could provide Franco-German leadership between these very difficult political figures, François Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl. That's why Helmut Kohl had this ingenious idea and move to suggest indirectly to François Mitterrand to nominate Delors as president of the European Commission. It arranged Mitterrand too, who was about to rebuild his own government. And Delors was candidate for assuming the role of prime minister in France. But it was an uneasy situation for Mitterrand too. There were other pretenders, Laurent Fabius, Claude Chesson, Pierre Bérégovoy, all very leftist, deeply rooted in the socialist tradition of his own party, which was not the case for Delors. So not only he could have an issue, an open future for Delors, but he could get rid of Delors too, because he feared a little bit the intellectual superiority of Delors. Delors, in his own memoirs, says Mitterrand had told him that he didn't want to be a powerless king under an all-powerful prime minister. So it was the ideal solution for France and for Germany to have Delors as president of the Commission. The second event I selected is the difficult way to conceive German reunification in the European context. When German reunification appeared on the horizon of history, and that was later than many people think with hindsight. It was only in November, December 1989, and not earlier. Even the West German political elite did not think that it would be possible in September still of 1989 for two reasons. First, they thought that the Soviets would never give up this key element of their security belt in Europe. And second, the argument was that even the East German opposition movement did not claim reunification. So where should the impetus come from? It was only in November, December of 1989, when, by the way, monetary union had already been convened upon, another myth. Still, Delors was the first who agreed on the Kohl's wish to be entirely autonomous, to decide upon the way in which Germany would manage its unification and the integration of East Germany in the European communities. It was the first enlargement to the East, the first step beyond the Iron Curtain. It was unthinkable until then. And indeed, nobody had thought about such an opportunity, such a possibility. So there were different options. Margaret Thatcher was very much in favor of treating the GDR as an accession country, which would have needed accession negotiations, which would certainly have, that was her hidden agenda, delayed, if not reunification, at least the integration of the GDR into the European community. A stance which triggered an outbreak of anger by Helmut Kohl, who insisted on the German autonomy to self-determine the destiny of the Germans. Mitterrand had a different stance. One of the sayings which is addressed to Mitterrand, but probably it goes further back in French history, is that you quit ambiguity only at your own expense. Mitterrand was very ambiguous in all his attitudes, in all his stances. I would avoid the term convictions. The ambiguity of Mitterrand was legendary. And it was once again in late 1989 that Mitterrand was ambiguous about the future of the two Germanys and German reunification. He even went to East Germany in December 1989, a diplomatic move with the meaning that he considered East Germany under still communist rule still as a sovereign country. The first who agreed on the German claim that self-determination was the right of the Germans for their reunification, the method of reunification, and subsequently the integration of East Germany into the European community was Jacques Delors. He said openly in the European Council meetings and to Helmut Kohl, you decide yourself. And if you decide for, that was the constitutional option the Germans choose, if you choose to enlarge Germany, integrate East Germany into West Germany, we are ready to consider West Germany, then Germany reunified, still as the same state, and East Germany will automatically be a member territory, part of the same state, which is already a member, Germany, in the European community. Delors wanted, at any rate, to avoid any sort of pushing Germany back to another geopolitical horizon by denying the Germans to become reunified member of the European still communities at the time. His idea was we must welcome the Germans so that the Germans stay committed to European integration. And the only way we can achieve this goal is to let them choose themselves the way in which they create their state unity and their integration into the European communities. Jacques Delors was the first among the West European statesmen, and thus he played a very important role in integrating smoothly East Germany into the European communities.
I'm very sorry to play timekeeper here.
Yes,
but
the last conclusive point
you have 1 or 2 more minutes to conclude. Thank you.
Is a more structural one, which was already mentioned by our predecessors. Jacques Delors had a political culture which bridged the gap as well between France and Germany. He was a federalist. He was even a deeply rooted federalist in personalism. He could imagine a Europe conceived as a multi-level governance system, not to say federal. He engaged for introducing the federal finality into the Maastricht Treaty. That is the moment when he failed, and that is the moment of his deception with the Germans, because in autumn 1991, the proposal for the Maastricht Treaty launched by the Dutch government eliminated this formula of a federal finality Delors had so much fought for, backed by the Germans until then. And then apparently, obviously, the German government abandoned this federal finality and abandoned the struggle of Delors for designing a federal future for the European Union. Still, Delors, with his personalist, federalist political culture, was a statesman who could, in the eyes of Germany, very well bridge again the different political cultures between centralizing France and federalizing Germany. And this is maybe the deepest level of mutual understanding and his role in Franco-German and European relations. Thanks a lot.
Was Delors a leader? And if, what kind of leader? I think we have to, as students here, as researchers here, to look into the broader framework of where to put Delors in our theoretical, academic, historical context. I think we get a lot of elements which are partly new for me. We were exchanging views. I had similar ideas, but I was not so deeply involved into the history. So we have had, and we have some kind of common stock of knowing Delors' activities and his way. But what are the consequences? How can we really explain his value? And what are the consequences for drawing on European strategies, on European analysis? I think that's quite important. One starting point is that if I talk to my economic colleagues and partly legal colleagues in Germany, they say, yeah, Delors was very helpful to establish the, it was already mentioned, the neoliberal strategies in economies. He was for the market. That's one of the deepest understanding, at least for economists in Germany, which are near to what the German orthodoxy thought was most important, namely ordoliberal setup. Yeah? Ordoliberal means a little bit different from neoliberal, that the state or the Commission, in the case of the European Union, should have certain powers not to invest into enterprises, but to set certain rules. And what the Commission is doing. One leading person of the ordoliberal idea in Germany, he said, in the German constitution, we don't have a clear view about the economic structure, but the Rome treaties gave us this structure. So this idea that, let's say, the market, and the Germans would say the soziale Marktwirtschaft, we listen that very much now in the campaign for the election, that this was again founded in Brussels, even reinforced in Brussels. And Delors' idea, which then came up with the l'Europe sans frontières, I don't know who would now propagate l'Europe sans frontières. I think there are a very small minority who would still make that as a major goal, that without frontiers. This was the idea of many economic experts of industries in Germany. So in this sense, he was taking up what was put forward. Even more, and that was not yet mentioned really, if I see that correctly, he was also instrumental, and I don't know exactly in which way, with the Delors Committee on the monetary and economic union, or economic and monetary union. And here I think the Germans were very happy, my German colleagues were very happy, because the independence of the European Central Bank and the way they can decide without any consultation with anybody else was a major demand from the German economic orthodoxy. And I think it's the strictest, most explicit forms of independence, because you would need to change the treaty to get them out of this kind of power situation. So I think here he was very much liked, seen as a positive driver. Somebody talked about driving forces, a driver for certain economic basic ideas which were popular in Germany, which were seen as a success formula for this point. So I think there was a leading factor. Perhaps he was not the only one, certainly not, because he was looking for consensus. He needed consensus. But I think he was very strong in, let's say, putting forward this kind of basic German, and there were some others too, for example, the British ideas and some of the Northern Europeans, the German ideas on this, how to structure the economic union and especially the monetary union. So I think that was one of the leading factors. Another leading factor, which I think was that he was very helpful in the European Council. The European Council is the key institution. I know that certain people would say the key institution, but for me, it's the key institution for how the European Union has developed from the middle of the 70s to today. Of course, not in all details and not without other institutions to help the European Council or to support and be active for and in the European Council. And here he played a major role as what is now formulated in the Lisbon Treaty as facilitating the consensus among the political leaders. They call themselves political leaders, therefore I quote them. And he facilitated this kind of consensus building. This, by the way, and this makes a difference to today, this is put in the Lisbon Treaty as a task for the President of the European Council. But at that time, of course, there were presidents, but rotating presidencies, which couldn't play this kind of role. So his way of building consensus, I think, was very important, especially in the economic part. He himself, in his memoirs, talked that he has la maîtrise intellectuelle du Conseil européen. Okay, might be slightly exaggerated here and there, but in any case, I think his self-understanding was very important that he should play the role. There's, of course, the anecdotal side of it, and of course, which is always informal, and you cannot put that down with a clear quote, that there was apparently a clear triangle, that for all, at least economic questions, Mitterrand, Delors, and Kohl talked before the European Council and had a certain idea what to do. But they didn't propose it to the European Council, but let the discussion go on. At a certain moment, then Kohl said, there are a lot of discussions, but Jacques, can't you tell us what we should do? And Jacques then told the rest what was the agreement among the three of them. But the others were not aware that this was pre-cooked by a Franco-German alliance, which others don't like so much, especially at that time. Of course, Mrs. Thatcher or the British Prime Minister never liked this kind of cooperation so much. So even if this anecdote might not be totally true, I think it's a major point of, let's say, seeing his role in the European Council as a major drive forward. I would like to have, if we talk in academic terms here, and I think that we should do, of course, leadership is always questioned. Is this the person who decided it? It's Machiavelli's prince who takes by his personality, virtù, the occasione. I hope I pronounce the Italian correctly. I'm under strict control by our rector. So the virtù, the occasione in the fortuna. Yeah? Was he somebody like that? Or if you take Max Weber's typologies of leaders, that you have the historical leaders, the rational legal one, and the charismatic. Interesting again that we had at the first intervention this question of charisma. And I think we need to check that how far this really worked and how far he was really, let's say, going beyond his knowledge, his wisdom and his strategies to become somebody who would be a person whom people would, let's say, in a certain way admire and take a certain authority of a charisma with him. So I think we have to look for that and to check how far this really worked over the years he was the president and also afterwards. Of course, these questions are very good for all kind of master theses here. And I suggest that certain students should look at that more closely. And I think we should not just look at his role in this sense, but look broader. What are his legacy that was there? Is van der Leyen the follow-up to Delors? Does he have similar strategies or not? Is there a Delors method, like we always talk about the Monnet method? Can we take out of Delors, let's say, a policy paper for van der Leyen? Would that be something to look interesting? I think we have to be careful of that. But nevertheless, it's a very starting point for a closer look also at reality. So the legacy is certainly in his policies, especially in the economic areas, market and monetary union, but also in the way we look at the European Union and we see how it could develop or where the weaknesses are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now be taking questions from the audience on both interventions, the French and the German panels.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Louis. I'm an academic assistant here at the college in the Pole Department. My question is a little bit broad and can be directed to both panels, and is linked to the close relationship that Delors had with important figures both in France and Germany, namely, for example, Mitterrand, but also with, for example, Chancellor Kohl in Germany. And what was the role, in your view, of Delors in fomenting and establishing a Franco-German partnership in Europe?
Thank you. Just this time is for a very quick and precise question, not broad question. We have a Q&A session for that after. Thank you.
Very briefly, I believe the key point was the confidence. It may not apply for Mitterrand, who had very ambivalent attitude to Delors, but he had confidence in his capacity to have a vision and a strong belief in Europe, shared by both. But it was the case with Helmut Kohl. It was also the case with Felipe González, for instance. So, and on top of that, Delors was a bit of Christian Democrat and a bit of socialist in the sense of what we have in Northern Europe. So he was compatible with most of the political leaders in Europe at this time.
Et si je peux juste rajouter un élément sur, effectivement, sur la relation qu'il a eue avec de très nombreux dirigeants, ce qui est très frappant dans la configuration de Delors, c'est la stabilité des dirigeants nationaux avec lesquels il a travaillé. Donc, dans le livre, on a un tableau, effectivement, on retrace cette stabilité, y compris en termes d'exercice de la présidence du Conseil. Il a exercé la présidence du Conseil au nom de la présidence de la Commission avec les mêmes leaders pendant presque une décennie. Et deuxième élément, par rapport à sa relation avec Kohl, et d'ailleurs sa relation avec Mitterrand, on essaye aussi de ne pas surestimer le poids politique que Delors accordait, que ces deux dirigeants accordaient à Delors, parce que d'une part, la relation avec Mitterrand était quand même relativement fragile, y compris dès le début, puisqu'on sait qu'au Conseil européen de Milan, il y avait des plans qui avaient été développés qui n'étaient pas ceux de la présidence de la Commission. Et par ailleurs, Helmut Kohl, je recherchais ce point, le 2 juin 1988, accepte le renouvellement de Delors pour un second mandat, mais il répond au président Mitterrand, il est compétent, c'est un bon président, je suis d'accord pour qu'il reste, mais seulement 2 ans. Au bout de 2 ans, Martin Bondemann le remplacera. Donc il faut aussi, finalement ça n'a pas été le cas, il a terminé son mandat. Donc il ne faut pas aussi surestimer la relation de confiance qu'il avait avec ses leaders, qui est au fondement de son pouvoir, mais qui n'était pas non plus à lui accorder la puissance pour la Commission, parce que derrière Delors, c'était la puissance de la Commission, et en tant que chef d'État et de gouvernement, il ne voulait pas que la Commission augmente de façon trop forte ses pouvoirs.
Si je puis ajouter une remarque seulement, en effet, Delors était un leader particulier, mais à tel point que les hommes d'État, les chefs de gouvernement, se méfiaient de sa capacité de les guider. Et il y avait des moments, en effet, même entre Kohl et Delors, où Kohl a dit « maintenant, ça suffit, il fait trop ». Et il a reconnu en l'action de Delors aussi disons, une tradition française à la centralisation bureaucratique qui allait au-delà de l'équilibre fédéral qui pour Kohl était l'idéal. Donc il est vrai que Delors n'était pas toujours l'homme de l'amour, même pas de Mitterrand et de Kohl. Il était néanmoins, si évidemment le pont entre la France et l'Allemagne, qu'il avait plus d'intérêt de rassurer les autres de son attention, de la prise en compte de leurs intérêts, que d'approfondir en plus ou de profiler en plus le tandem franco-allemand. Ça, c'était évident. De Gaulle était le franco-allemand. Donc, son action était plutôt de rassurer l'autre que l'Europe n'était pas uniquement franco-allemand. C'est ainsi que, comme M. LETTA l'a dit, il a fait le tour d'Europe avant toutes les grandes décisions qui s'annonçaient, et pas seulement le tour des capitales. C'était aussi une traduction de ses convictions personnalistes et fédéralistes. Il voulait intégrer dans l'Europe tous les échelons de la société, les peuples, et pas seulement les leaders franco-allemands. Mais c'était sa forme de leadership.
No more question? Just, okay, one.
Oui, bonjour. Je m'appelle Antoine. Je suis étudiant ici dans le département économique. J'ai une question plutôt pour le panel français, plutôt sur l'aspect scientifique que Delors a amené dans sa politique au lieu d'une politique militante. D'après votre opinion, à quel point ça a changé la sphère de gouvernance européenne ou actuelle qu'on voit en Europe sur l'aspect plus scientifique que basé sur l'aspect militant politique?
Merci pour cette question. Vous avez le bon sens de demander mon avis plutôt que des analyses très approfondies, parce que je pense qu'il faudrait se pencher beaucoup plus sur cette question-là. L'impression que j'ai à la lecture des cours que j'ai trouvés, c'est que les connaissances de Jacques Delors s'affermissent progressivement. Il y a très très peu de notes de bas de page, de références dans ces cours, ce qui est extrêmement dommage, parce qu'on aurait pu suivre un peu mieux le fil de sa pensée. Mais je suis sûre que si on va chercher dans d'autres archives au même moment, au commissariat au plan ou dans ses archives personnelles, on trouverait des choses supplémentaires. Et donc j'ai l'impression que c'est au moment où il maîtrise suffisamment ces éléments, il évoque le fait qu'il y a des travaux sociologiques qui sont menés sur telle ou telle question, il évoque le fait que ces travaux soient transversaux, que les sujets ne soient pas, enfin ce qui l'intéresse, c'est que les sujets ne soient pas traités les uns à côté des autres, mais que certains scientifiques essayent de saisir ensemble des problématiques, et notamment quand il travaille sur la différence entre les comptes de la nation et ce que ça peut donner dans la mise en indicateur. Là, il réfléchit à ce qu'on peut faire. Est-ce qu'on peut faire des indicateurs sociaux qui soient efficaces? Est-ce que ce sont des indicateurs économiques ou pas? En tout cas, moi, c'est cet aspect-là que j'ai trouvé réellement très, très, très intéressant. Et je crois que ça irrigue toute sa manière de réfléchir. Donc, à partir du moment où il a trouvé suffisamment d'éléments de contenu, ensuite, il passe à l'échelle et il essaye de le mettre en œuvre. Et à ce moment-là, ce n'est plus des politiques publiques, c'est de la politique. En tout cas, c'est comme ça que je le lis.
Juste un très bref réponse à votre question. Effectivement, par rapport à la question de la méthode ou de ce rapport à la science, la méthode qu'on a essayé d'étudier dans l'ouvrage, c'est vrai que c'est une méthode qui puise dans le plan. Donc, il y a quand même toute une réflexion autour du plan comme méthode. Alors, la question, c'est du coup de savoir qu'est-ce que cette méthode, ensuite, comment elle a été développée, puisqu'on montre que, par exemple, les initiatives que Delors avait développées dans des rapports célèbres à la fin des années 70 sur une forme de planification européenne ont largement échoué, mais on montre aussi que du coup cette méthode, on le retrouve par exemple dans des politiques qu'on connaît aujourd'hui. Par exemple, c'est Delors et sa présidence qui développent le cadre financier pluriannuel qu'on connaît aujourd'hui et dont les négociations vont commencer. Dernière réflexion, Delors le planificateur, donc il y a toute la réflexion que Céline vient d'indiquer ici par rapport à son enseignement à l'ENA. On peut citer qu'il a été également professeur associé à l'Université Dauphine. Donc, on montre d'ailleurs qu'il a dirigé des thèses quand il était à Dauphine, donc c'est très peu connu, d'où l'ensemble des publications qu'a présenté Fabrice tout à l'heure. Et enfin, dernier élément, il ne faut pas oublier que le jeune rédacteur qui entre à la Banque de France, qu'on a appelé cet intellectuel autodidacte, il est ensuite formé
par le syndicalisme, et en particulier le syndicalisme chrétien. Et donc, on essaye de montrer, à travers sa pratique du pouvoir, ce que j'ai moi-même appelé l'art européen de gouverner, que par exemple, l'ingénieur du social qu'il a été, à travers ses cours, par exemple, à l'ENA, il a essayé de le transposer dans la qualité qu'il a réussi à essayer de concevoir, en tout cas dans son premier mandat, d'être l'ingénieur de la collégialité. Donc, comment l'ingénieur du social est devenu l'ingénieur de la collégialité.
Merci beaucoup. Il y aura une session Q&A pour les autres questions. Donc, ceux qui n'ont pas pu poser leurs questions pourront les poser après.
Well, hello everyone and welcome back. We'll move to the second part of the afternoon. After us, it will be the colleagues from Natolin. But first of all, let's start with Professor Westlake. So it's now time to leave continental Europe behind and cross the Channel and move to the United Kingdom to explore the relationship between Jacques Delors and Britain. It's my pleasure, as I said, to introduce our next speaker, Professor Martin Westlake. Thank you for joining us today. Professor Westlake is a visiting professor here in Bruges in the Pole Department and also in the London School of Economics European Institute. With over 4 decades of experience studying European integration and working in EU institutions, he brings some parallel insight from the inner workings of European governance. His trajectory has brought him across the Council of Europe, the US Council of Ministers, the European Commission, the European Parliament, and in the end, the European Economic and Social Committee, where he served as a Secretary General until 2013. In addition to this hands-on career in European affairs, he has written extensively on EU institutions and European and British politics. If we think about UK-Delors relations, 3 iconic moments come to the collective mind. Margaret Thatcher's 1988 Bruges speech here at the college, where she famously warned against our European super-state, and the Sun's infamous Up Yours Delors headline. However, the relationship between the UK and Jacques Delors was never simple. As Professor Westlake will show, the story is much more complex than these 2 flashpoints. In fact, it was a relationship shaped by shifting periods, strong personalities, and different perspectives. Today, Professor Westlake will present his paper, Delors, the European Viewed from the UK. His presentation will navigate the complexities of Delors' relationship with Britain by exploring, again, key periods, personalities, and perspectives. A changing relationship from his early years as an MEP in the European Parliament to his decade as a President of the European Commission, but also as a Minister of Finance in France. This session will also examine how personalities shaped the UK Delors dynamic, from Margaret Thatcher to John Major, but also by the many Brits present at the time in European institutions. All this against the backdrop of British media portrayals and shifting political landscapes. And of course, we'll get a glimpse of Delors' own view of Britain, including his famous 2012 suggestion that the UK might be better suited to a different kind of relationship with the EU. With that, Professor Westlake, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, he's given my speech now. Thank you to the organisers of the conference, especially Didier, for giving me the chance to wander down this particular memory lane. It's one I saw up close in the 1980s and 1990s as an official working in Secretariat General of the Commission. I was a fly on the wall, but nevertheless I was on the wall. I'm going to dare to use Shakespeare rather than Molière, if you don't mind, Didier. In The Tempest, there is a line, Shakespeare's play, there is a line, "Oh wonder, how many goodly creatures are here, oh brave new world that has such people in it." I don't wish to sound naive, but that brave new world, I'm talking about the 1980s and 90s, included the likes of Jacques Delors, François Mitterrand, Helmut Kohl, Margaret Thatcher, Lord Francis Arthur Cockfield, and so on. There genuinely were giants in those days. And as Delors put it on one occasion, the clouds of economic depression had suddenly departed, and they could see blue sky ahead. Now, as I say in my abstract, I intend to focus on a series of periods, personalities, and perspectives that together went to make up the complex relationship between Jacques Delors and the UK. Clearly, I can't cover everything in the 20-odd minutes that I have, and anyway, my paper's a work in progress. So I'm going to try and take an illustrative approach, and I'm going to concentrate a bit more on the human side, especially for the students, because all of these personalities won't mean very much to you as personalities. Here are 3 of them. Oh no, it's not working. Why isn't it working? the inevitable technical problem. Voila, here are three of them. What better place to start than here in Bruges on the 20th of September 1988 with Margaret Thatcher's famous or infamous speech, the Bruges speech. Now, the three people in the photograph, on the left, the man praying is Sir David Hannay, as he then was, who was the UK's permanent representative to the EU from 1985 to 1990. The lady on the right, you will probably recognise as Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1979 to 1990. And the gentleman in the middle is Sir Bernard Ingham, who was her press secretary, otherwise known as a spin doctor. Now, Hannay, the man praying on the left, it was his idea for her to make a speech in Bruges. He said, was it not time for us to get off the back foot and set out our vision for the community in a compelling and positive manner? Thatcher's delivery, which was in the belfry over there, is available on YouTube, and you can go and look at it. It's not at all an aggressive delivery. It's rather, how can I put it, an emotional one in some senses. But it was the gentleman in the middle, the spin doctor, and the spin he put on her speech back home in the UK that changed the meaning of her speech. Let me, because it drips with irony, if I can just cite a few words from her speech. We shall always look on Warsaw, Prague, and Budapest as great European cities. This was when they were frozen in the permafrost behind the Iron Curtain. Britain, listen to this one, Britain doesn't dream of some cozy, isolated existence on the fringes of the European community. Our destiny is in Europe as part of the community. But a little way through the speech, there came another tone. We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers of the state in Britain only to see them imposed at a European level with a European superstate exercising a new dominance from Brussels. So what was going on? Those lines were written by the gentleman in the back there, Charles Powell, who was her personal private secretary and was a notorious Eurosceptic. Margaret Thatcher herself never wrote a speech. She couldn't write speeches. So the way speeches were written was that people spoke to her and then drafted what they thought she meant. So Charles Powell drafted what he thought she meant, hence the Eurosceptic lines in the speech, which was otherwise written by the Foreign Office. And it was Bernard Ingham who then picked out those lines and spun them to the Eurosceptic press back home. So the Bruges speech has to be understood in its context. It was a response both internally to the more pro-EU stance of her foreign secretary, Sir Geoffrey Howe on the right in that picture, but it was also externally a response to the European Commission and to its president, Jacques Delors, who had dared to set foot in Margaret Thatcher's fiefdom and speak to her mortal enemies just 13 days before. And I'll come on to that episode in a moment. So a few words about Thatcher. She was horribly patronized in her early days as Prime Minister, and there was more than a whiff of misogyny in all of that. Giscard d'Estaing described her as a grocer's daughter. Chirac described her as a shrew and a fishmonger's wife. And Mitterrand described her as having the eyes of Caligula and the lips of Marilyn Monroe. So she was, how can I put it? She was somebody who had to put up with quite a lot of, how can I put it, patronizing remarks from French politicians. If I leave her for a moment and talk more about Delors, he first came across the radar screen of the UK, I think, when he was in the European Parliament, as we heard earlier, 1979 to 1981. He was president of a committee called the EMAC, the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. And what I've done as part of my research is I've gone back and spoken to some of the members of that committee in those days, British members. Now, perversely, because of the electoral system in the UK, there were 60 Conservatives and only 17 Labour members, and most of them were anti-European. But here's what they say, and I've sort of conflated them together. He immediately made a big impact. He impressed with his chairmanship. He was a good listener and brilliant at synthesizing. He loved the geography of the meeting rooms. He impressed with his pragmatism and lack of hard ideological stances. an extraordinarily classless man without airs and graces. Not physically imposing, but with a quiet charisma. He didn't have prejudices. He was not at all anti-British. He was very impressed by the Tories' pragmatic approach and was interested in their attention to non-tariff barriers to trade, mutual recognition, and the need to move away from micro-legislation. So hardly an alien force, as it were, in the eyes of the British Conservatives in those days. He next then became French Minister of Finance, and nobody was surprised in the European Parliament, by the way, when that happened, where he impressed everybody with his mastery of economic, financial and budgetary affairs. And he particularly impressed Geoffrey Howe, who was then Chancellor of the Exchequer for part of that time. He also impressed Thatcher when Mitterrand brought the whole French government to the UK in 1982. Jacques Delors, summarized one of the exchanges of views that they had had, and Thatcher was quietly impressed. The next part I will skate over because we've already spoken about his appointment as President of the European Commission. The only thing I would say is that he was not Margaret Thatcher's first choice, not by a long chalk. She was championing Etienne d'Avignon, who was a Belgian member of the Commission already. And when I was doing my research for the paper, it struck me just how extraordinary Delors' man management skills were. We tend to forget it now. In his first commission, he had Claude Chesson, who was Mitterrand's #1 choice and had to accept a relatively junior position. He had Frans Andriessen, who was one of his competitors for the position. He had Henning Christoffersen, who was another competitor for his position. He accepted David Williamson as Secretary General when Émile Noël retired, and he also accepted Thatcher's proposal of Lord Francis Arthur Cockfield and skillfully turned him into an ally by giving him the internal market dossier. Extraordinary skills. Thatcher in those years was cultivating a sense of betrayal. She was forever being tricked into things by devious and perfidious Europeans, starting with Bettino Craxi and Mario Andreotti. So she felt she was jumped into the IGC at Milan in 1985, jumped into conceding qualified majority voting and so on and so forth. And then when she appointed commissioners like Lord Cockfield or Sir Leon Britton, they went native. So she was forever getting frustrated. Now, it's true that Delors in his first term was very modest in his ambitions. I mean, the internal market was a massive ambition, but he went before the parliament and said, don't worry, I'm not proposing to do anything else. I won't make any, the word he used was thoughtless promises. But nevertheless, his first speech to the parliament was peppered with neuralgic topics such as monetary union, fiscal harmonization, and European collective bargaining. Matters first came to a head with Margaret Thatcher in London in 1986 at the end of the British presidency in that year. It was first a very public standoff between her and him. Basically, what happened was she wouldn't let him speak. So she did all the speaking. It was after a European Council meeting, and he got sulkier and sulkier, as you can see in the picture. And right at the end of all of the questions from the journalists, one journalist very pointedly put a question to Jacques Delors, and he wouldn't answer. And Margaret Thatcher then said, Monsieur Delors is the strong, silent type. So she was getting her revenge on a Brit, her revenge on a French politician for the way that she felt she had been patronized. But of course, that meant that relations between the two were in decline already by 1986. 1988, in my rapid summary of what was going on, was a pivotal year. In relations between Delors and the UK, but also more fundamentally between the UK and the European integration process. In February of that year, the leader of the opposition, the Labour opposition, Neil Kinnock, paid a first official visit to the European Commission. Now, this was a political party that in 1983 had been promising withdrawal from the European Union without a referendum. By 1988, he had managed to pull the party much further to the centre ground and a pro-European stance. And then, on 7th of December, Jacques Delors delivered a speech in Bournemouth to the Trades Union Congress of the United Kingdom, and the title of his speech was The Social Dimension. Now, one line in it, just to give you an example of the sort of thing that he said: the measures to be taken will concern the area of collective bargaining and legislation. He was promising to do this at the European level. Now, that was what turned all of the trades unions in the UK, with one exception, into a pro-European, pro-internal market stance, which enabled the Labour Party at its Congress a little bit later the same year to switch its position as well to a pro-European stance. But for the Conservatives, it was seen as a provocation. As one of them said to me, where is it? It was a massive provocation. For us, it meant the unions were coming again. So depending on the personality, there you have, sorry, I forgot to click, there you have Neil Kinnock on the left and Jacques Delors on the right. And you can see the complicity between the two of them. They were meeting regularly. They were fellow socialists meeting in the meetings of the Federation of Socialist Leaders. And here's me doing a bit of in-field research last week in London with Neil Kinnock, now 82 on the right there. And he wished me to send his warmest greetings to you all, and particularly to the students, to whom he would like to point out that in 1993, his son, Stephen, who's now a minister in the Labour government, was a student sitting there in 1993. And he met his wife whilst he was sitting there, a lady called Helle Thorning-Schmidt, who went on to become Prime Minister of Denmark from 2011 to 2015. So, students, you never know. You never know. Anyway, so just as Delors' speech led to the mainstream pro-European stance of the Labour Party from then on onwards, it also led to the increasingly Eurosceptical stance of the Conservative Party. It led directly to the creation of the anti-EU Bruges group of Conservatives. It was Bournemouth on the 7th of September that led to Bruges on the 20th of September the same year. And it led also, ultimately, to Margaret Thatcher's resignation. So, as I say, periods, perspectives, and personalities. I don't really have much time to enter into too much detail about Thatcher's successor, John Major, but I would like to read out one comment he made. Delors was an able and sensitive man, if sometimes a little prickly. European councils have a standard format which includes an informal lunch for leaders at which the host nation lays on excellent food and exceptionally fine wine. At these lunches, Delors was formidable and dangerous. As the meal progressed, the summit chairman would invite him to raise pertinent matters, and Delors often took full advantage of the opportunity. If the topic was unappealing to the British, his accent seemed to thicken, and vague generalities replaced the detail of which he was known to be a master. It was a trap for the unwary. I soon learned to forego the wine because a contentious proposition from Delors over lunch, if unchallenged at the time, would become a conclusion of the summit. Anyway, that's not for nothing. I forget who it was who said it, that Maastricht was Delors' least favorite treaty because of all the compromises that he had to make. I don't really have time to enter into any detail about the role of the diplomats, nor of the Sun, as the tabloid press in the UK, as Inigo mentioned. Here's the most egregious example of the sort of rubbish that Jacques Delors had to put up with in Brussels, just as Neil Kinnock had to put up with that sort of stuff back in the UK. But I want briefly in my conclusion to talk about, to use a saying by a Spanish philosopher, José Ortega y Gasset, who famously declared, "I am myself and my circumstances." And I would argue that the three people that I've been talking about mostly were themselves and their circumstances. And the most fundamental irony of all is that Jacques Delors, Margaret Thatcher, and John Major were not so very different in character. They all came from modest origins. They were all meritocrats. They were none of them natural insiders in their parties. In other words, in another world, they might have been kindred spirits sitting down to do business together. But as themselves and their circumstances, they responded to a very different set of imperatives, and in so doing found themselves in conflictual relationships that were curiously both fraught and symbiotic. I want to finish on a personal note, following in Didier's example. There are all these photographs of Delors always looking serious, never smiling. Delors had a great sense of humor. This was me in later years as Secretary General of the European Economic and Social Committee at a conference at the Palais d'Iéna in Paris. Delors was there as our keynote speaker. We knew each other quite well by then. And he was asking me, the question he was asking me was, I want to use the words exactly. What should we do? What can be done about the state of public opinion in the UK? And I said, perhaps you should speak there more often. Now, a few seconds later, he burst into laughter. As you can see there, George Dassis, the trades union in the background, is wondering how he is going to react. But Delors had a great sense of humor and was a very human person. Apart from anything else, he was a very modest person. And there also was a clash, a fundamental clash with Margaret Thatcher, who at times was anything but human. So I want to finish with a nice image of Delors. Oops, if I can. That's Delors saying to British journalists, I'm not at all interfering in British politics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for a quick Q&A, maybe later on. Okay, so we move to Natolin.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe? I deliberately left time for questions. I'm looking at my research seminar students.
I think we have time. We have 3 minutes, so I think we can...
Get extra points if you ask a question.
Someone has a question?
Alors, je me permets d'ajouter une phrase. Vous avez parlé des paradoxes de Delors. Il y a un autre paradoxe. Les deux biographies, les meilleures biographies de Jacques Delors sont de Charles Grant, britannique, et George Ross, américain. Ça, c'est aussi un paradoxe, en quelque sorte. Hein?
Do we have any questions? If not, I will just ask one brief question, is because you mentioned what, in the transition to John Major, you mentioned how he saw Brussels, or how he saw Delors, but if you could have some words on how Delors and Brussels saw that transition to the new government.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that Delors was not at all anti-British, never. And he, as I will say in my paper, one of the problems for Delors was that he was not a real politician in the sense that he wanted to stand for election all the time. And therefore, he didn't really understand the vital imperative for all elected representatives, which is to survive, basically, which is to be able to come back. It was one of the reasons why he got so frustrated with John Major, because John Major was trying to survive at home. And Jacques Delors had difficulty in understanding that that was why he was twisting and turning at Maastricht, and not because he just wanted to stick a spoke in the wheels of the European integration process. I think later on, though, he realized, he came to understand just how difficult British politics had been, especially, as I said, by the 2010s, 2011s, when British public opinion was really turning quite viscerally Eurosceptic. And indeed, in 2012, I think, he gave an interview to Handelsblatt in which he said that he would understand if the UK no longer felt able to be a full member. If the British cannot support the trend towards more integration in Europe, we can nevertheless remain friends, but on a different basis. I could imagine a form such as a European Economic Area or a free trade agreement. Now, that was in 2012, a year before David Cameron's 2013 Bloomberg speech in which he first promised a referendum. And by the way, Margaret Thatcher, also, who had been viscerally anti-referendum all of her career, in the end made a speech as a member of the House of Lords in which she argued that there should be a referendum about the Maastricht Treaty and whether it should be ratified in the UK. So they were, how can I put it? They were not passing ships in the night, but they were going in diametrically opposed directions, but with the same spirit.
Thank you once again, Professor Westlake. And now we move to Natolin. I hope our colleagues can hear us.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, perfectly.
Good evening, everyone, and hello from Natolin. My name is Nour BEN MEFTEH, and I am an academic assistant at the College of Europe in Natolin and a graduate of the European Interdisciplinary Studies Master's Program. I would like to first take a moment to appreciate this occasion where the college comes together. It is always pleasant to have such conferences. I will be presenting the speakers for the panel Delors, the European Viewed Beyond and After the Wall. But before that, allow me to share a personal anecdote. To be honest, as a non-European, I wasn't very familiar myself with Jacques Delors until last year, when I discovered him here in Natolin as a student through my dear friend Anatole Bonardo, who is now a colleague in Tirana and present with you in the room. Since then, I have discovered that I knew the policies well, but without knowing the person behind them, especially as someone interested in regional integration models. It is thus with great honor that I get to present this panel, specifically as someone coming from beyond walls, but walls very different from the ones we will address in this panel today. So our panel brings together two esteemed scholars and dear professors of mine who will explore key aspects of Delors' legacy in the context of European transformation. Our first speaker, Professor Pascaline Vinande, is the Director of Studies at the Department of European Interdisciplinary Studies at the College of Europe in Natolin. She is also teaching in the Institute of European Studies at the Université Libre de Bruxelles. She is the author of award-winning book Eisenhower, Kennedy, and the United States of Europe, as well as numerous volumes and articles. Today, she will focus on how the Monnet and Delors methods contributed in shaping European integration. Following her, Professor Georges Mink will examine Jacques Delors' empathy toward post-communist Central European countries and his role in integration of European community after the fall of the Soviet Union. He will also address Delors' speech to inaugurate our campus, Natolin. Professor Mink is a permanent professor in Natolin and the chair of European Civilization at Natolin. He is French sociologist of Polish origin, specialized in Central and Eastern Europe. He was the president of the International Council for Central and East European Studies and the director of research of the Institute of Social Sciences and Political Science at the University of Paris X. With that, I am pleased to invite Professor Pascaline Vinande to take the floor.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here to talk to you. And as our great assistant, Nour just told you, I will focus today on the Monnet and the Delors methods, the ideas, the projects, the strategies, the action committees, and networks. As I do so, I will talk very briefly, because Georges will do this certainly more in depth than I can, about Monnet and Delors' attitudes towards Central and Eastern Europe. Now, Jacques Delors much admired Jean Monnet, and he praised him for being un visionnaire, lucide sur le monde à venir, soucieux de préparer les échéances inéluctables, construisant le schéma de l'Europe de demain. And so the first question to be asked is perhaps, what were Monnet's main ideas, goals, and plans for Europe? Well, he summed it all up in a note to his trusted associate Max Kohlstam in 1963. Since 1950, the aim of European integration has been to suppress the spirit of superiority, of domination, which has animated European nations, cause wars, and almost doomed Europe, and can again, if not destroyed, doom the world. How can we do it? Apply among nations the principles of these nations and of civilization, rules, institutions. By creating Europe, we establish a balance with the United States. By creating a partnership, which is now possible between Europe and the United States, we also make it possible to arrive at an agreement between East and West. This is then the beginning of the organization of peace. And I will focus on this last part because the idea was, you see, for Monnet, that only by making Western Europe economically and politically strong through European integration, you could enter into an Atlantic partnership with the US. The European communities must not be allowed, of course, to drown in an Atlantic soup, but they were still in their formative stages. But the sooner Europe united, the sooner one could begin to build a strong and prosperous Atlantic community. Prosperity and stability in Western Europe would then irresistibly attract Eastern European satellites and ultimately create the conditions for peace with the Soviet Union. So now, what were Delors' main ideas, goals, and plans for Europe? Well, a lot of colleagues already discussed this, but certainly what came through during his time at the European Commission was the very important goal of establishing a large common single market. But not just that. It was a single market that would be visible and concrete for all citizens to experience, including via the material benefits they would obtain, thereby generating their sense of belonging to the European communities. Now Delors also had another goal, which certainly included the social dimension, and I think Martin Westlake certainly alluded to this. There was this idea that you would have a European social system to encourage a dialogue between trade union and employers. And there was also this idea very, very much in tune with his personalist background that society should not crush the individual. So to find the appropriate contribution of the individual to society, but also of regions and nations, the principle of subsidiarity was an integral part of Delors' vision for Europe. And what else could we say here? Well, Delors also wanted not only to unite people, as did Monnet, but also to associate nations. And in 1993, Delors encapsulated this conception of federalism in the concept of a federation of nation states. Now, its federal Europe was meant to prevent Europe from being condemned to failure and decline, as he often said. Based on its peoples and nations, Delors' Europe would be powerful enough to be respected in the world because it would have the means to defend its values, as it said, and also to concretely put them at the service of others, i.e. to be generous. Now, this is something that Monnet also frequently underlined. Now, Pascal Lamy wrote that maybe Delors did not have an Atlantist view of Europe, but he nevertheless proposed a global partnership with the United States. And in 1989, speaking at the College of Europe, he said that he saw the European community, a communauté de droit, ensemble démocratique, économie dynamique, as a catalyst to developments in communist Europe. With the acceleration of history, he pressed for further adaptation of European institutions and decision-making. This was important to answer the challenges of enlargement to the East. And in 1992, Delors argued that if institutional reform did not go hand in hand with the process of enlargement, the result would be a diluted union and an enlarged market lacking a clear-cut political dimension. And he was very much disappointed with the result of Maastricht. Now, what were Monnet's and Delors' action strategies to make their visions come true, sometimes so-called methods? I can't sum it all up, but certainly Monnet had an institutional method of action where you focus on the common rules which each member state was committed to respect and common institution to watch over the application of these rules. And then you had the permanent dialogue between, the equivalent of the Commission and the national governments expressing the national views. The aim was to build a political union, step by step, like its economic integration, ultimately, Monet said, resulting in a European federation. Now, in 1963, Monet and his team wrote an important article entitled Ferment of Change. It was in the Journal of Common Market Studies. They spent a lot of time, I was in touch with my school staff over this, they spent a lot of time, distilling what exactly was Monet's vision. And what comes through, and it's very much in tune with what our rector was saying earlier, is that making Europe for them was about adapting to changing circumstances. And so, as such, the methods, the strategies of action could change depending on changing circumstances. So, I want to talk to Max Korstam, who was, of course, the vice president of Monet's Action Committee for the United States of Europe, and then created a second committee after Monet, ended his committees. So the second committee was active in the 1980s. And I want to ask him, so what was the Monet method? And he told me, actually, there was no Monet method. What it was all about is adapting to changing circumstances. And so you have the title of the article, Ferment of Change. Is the Ferment of Change method of action, which is actually an action strategy for diffusing the European model in Europe, but also in the world, whilst constantly adapting to changing circumstances. And as this happens, the hope was that Europeans would become aware of their responsibilities to the world. So in Monet thinking, the method of the engrenage, as later theorized by the neo-functionists, had a clear external dimension. Now, if we go to Jacques Delors now, Jacques Delors not only admired Monet, but he also read his memoirs. He did those of Paul-Henri Spaak, Walter Hallstein, and so on. And when he encountered difficulties in his European endeavors, he went back to them, right? So Delors made no secret of using the method of small steps, this stratégie de l'engrenage, as he said. How would I say this? He used it as a kind of institutional method paired with a kind of strategy that he used to convince decision makers. And Pascal Lamy recently came, to the college in Natolin, and he basically said that there were different phases. And I will now, in Delors' methods, of strategy for convincing, decision makers. So the first phase was the listening phase, to find out which options would be more acceptable to them. And for example, now using the Delors archive, so in preparation for the first Commission presidency, and for what became the Single European Act, Delors toured European capitals, presenting European heads and state and government with carefully crafted options and listening to their views while taking notes. Then came the decision-making phase, at the European Council level, where Delors would wait for the most propitious moment to present the options again, while highlighting those on which there was the most agreement. So it was indeed redoutable, right, in this method. And lunches were also very important, as we see, right?
Professor Vinant?
Yes, I will
yes, because yes, only 10 minutes are left for Professor Mink, so if you can...
Okay, so I will wrap up. Okay, so then the next one was the sequencing, having a clear calendar, with deadlines along the way. What I would like to highlight here as well is that with the Maastricht Treaty, you have this idea that, with momentous changes in Central and Eastern Europe, you need maybe another kind of method. And this is where, because I don't have time to go into this is where you begin to see on the part of Delors the need to create maybe something else once he's finished with the European Commission, and this is going to be Notre Europe. Now, in the paper, I would like to have time to look into Monet's Action Committee for the United States of Europe, to look at the methods there that was adapted to changing circumstances. The successor, the Action Committee for Europe that was headed by Max Konstam, and in which Delors participated and which was also very instrumental in the launching of the Single European Act. And finally, I'd like to talk about Notre Europe. So that concludes what I had to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Vinand. And unfortunately, we have time constraints, so we will move directly to Professor Mink.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Merci à tout le monde et en particulier à Didier de nous avoir invités. Parler de Delors, de l'importance pour Natolin. Tout le monde sait qu'il a été un de ceux qui ont poussé à la création de Natolin et aussi un de ceux qui solennellement ont inauguré Natolin. Moi, je ne suis pas dérologue. Donc, je veux essayer par la méthode que j'ai choisie d'expliquer quelle était l'évolution de la perception de l'Europe centrale et orientale chez Delors, en me basant en fait sur l'idée qu'il a fait 2 mandats. Son premier mandat démarrait à une date intéressante puisque c'était le changement de l'Union soviétique avec la venue au pouvoir de Mikhail Gorbatchev, et le deuxième mandat commençait à peu près, un peu avant, la chute du mur de Berlin. Pour analyser donc ces attitudes, j'ai choisi 2 discours majeurs de Jacques Delors, prononcés à des moments symboliques significatifs de l'histoire européenne, qui permettent de comprendre l'évolution de sa perception des pays de l'Europe centrale et orientale et par voie de conséquence ses convictions, ses visions et ses actions. Le premier discours est prononcé le 17 janvier 1989 au Parlement européen à Strasbourg. Il marque le passage du premier mandat de Delors qui débute en 1985 au deuxième mandat qui se terminera en 1995. Le deuxième discours sera prononcé lors de sa tournée en Europe centrale devant les élus polonais le 19 mai 1994. Pendant cette même tournée, le président de la Commission se rend sur le campus de Natolin, l'occasion de donner sa vision de l'éducation et de l'Europe à élargir. Rappelons quelques éléments du contexte. Le 11 mars 1985, Mikhail Gorbatchev accède au pouvoir en Russe, encore en pleine guerre froide. En Pologne, Solidarność est interdit. En Tchécoslovaquie, la normalisation bat son plein face à une courageuse opposition autour de la Charte 77 qui passe le gros de son temps dans les prisons. En Hongrie règne Károly Gross dans ce que l'on a appelé métaphoriquement la baraque la plus gaie du camp socialiste ou encore l'archipel de Goulash. Delors parle assez abstraitement dans son discours des relations Est-Ouest, de la 3e corbeille de la conférence de Helsinki, mais l'Europe centrale n'apparaît que comme les autres Europes, étranges plurielles, ne distinguant pas les différents cas. Cela peut étonner puisque nous sommes à 5 mois des élections semi-libres en Pologne, à 8 mois du flot des fugitifs est-allemands qui, passant par la Hongrie, forceront le communiste réformateur à couper les barbelés de la frontière Est-Ouest, et surtout à 10 mois de la destruction du mur de Berlin. Les autres Europes, référence probable à une autre Europe du poète polonais Czesław Miłosz, c'est encore un ensemble indistinct, peu présent dans les indications stratégiques de ce discours augurant le nouveau mandat. C'est seulement à la fin de son discours qu'il montrera sa lucidité géopolitique qui ne pourra que lui attirer la sympathie des intellectuels de l'autre Europe. Il y dit ce qu'il pense des tentatives de séduction de Gorbatchev. Citons-le. « Je ne voudrais pas terminer ce discours sans faire référence au concept de la maison Europe, l'Europe, notre maison commune, tel que l'a évoqué M. Gorbatchev. Bien sûr, nous voulons de toutes nos forces que la paix, l'échange et la coopération soient les traits de l'Europe de demain. Mais gardons-nous de tout lyrisme, de tout effet d'annonce. Et je dirais pour mieux me faire comprendre que nous rêvons d'un village Europe. Mais si j'avais aujourd'hui à dessiner ce village, j'y verrais bien une maison appelée Communauté européenne, dont nous serions les seuls architectes et dont nous conserverions soigneusement les clés. Voici un grand Européen qui comprend parfaitement les données géopolitiques, exactement à l'opposé du président François Mitterrand, pour ne mentionner que lui, qui croit que la Russie est définitivement attirée par le destin européen. D'où viendra le projet d'inclure l'Empire russe affaibli dans la Confédération européenne? Projet reçu froidement par les leaders de l'Europe centrale et notamment Václav Havel. Mais dans quelques mois seulement, les discours et les actes qui suivront changeront du tout au tout. En 1989, l'année des révolutions pacifiques, les pays de l'ancien bloc soviétique, en voie de se démocratiser et appliquer des thérapies graduelles ou de choc, sont confrontés aux effets du mal développement du modèle économique soviétique. Le cas le plus simple sera celui de l'Allemagne de l'Est, qui sera tenue à bout de bras par l'Allemagne de l'Ouest. La Hongrie et la Tchécoslovaquie n'ont pas pratiqué une politique excessive d'endettement et disposent d'une certaine culture libérale. Le cas le plus grave sera celui de la Pologne, confrontée à une gigantesque dette extérieure et à l'hyperinflation. Et c'est précisément Jacques Delors qui, avec le ministre français des Affaires étrangères, Roland Dumas, sera un des premiers à venir à l'aide de la Pologne avec des financements ad hoc et notamment avec l'idée d'un fonds de stabilisation d'1 milliard de dollars. On le sait par ses écrits que Delors admire le mouvement syndical Solidarność, qu'il connaît les milieux catholiques progressistes polonais. Cela facilitera ultérieurement ses contacts avec le Premier ministre non communiste Tadeusz Mazowiecki, et dont il partage et apprécie l'attachement à la doctrine personnaliste d'Emmanuel Mounier. Il partage aussi la vision de Milan Kundera de l'Occident kidnappé. Il est utile ici de souligner que lors de ses contacts avec le Collège de Bruges, il côtoie un réfugié polonais de Marthe, le recteur Jerzy Łukaszewski. À cet égard, le discours de Jacques Delors devant les parlementaires polonais en 1994 est significatif de sa sympathie pour les nouvelles démocraties, notamment la Pologne. Je cite Delors: « Prendre la parole à l'occasion de cette session plénière extraordinaire revêt une signification particulière. Parlementaires, vous incarnez l'idéal démocratique. C'est bien sûr le rôle décisif de votre pays dans l'effondrement du totalitarisme soviétique qui marque les esprits. Une action qui a semblé d'un courage presque aveugle sur le coup et qui paraît miraculeuse avec le recul, compte tenu de la chape de plomb qui pesait sur vous. L'unité de la nation, sous la bannière de solidarité, est entrée comme une légende dans l'histoire de la Pologne et au-delà, dans celle de l'Europe. Et il continuera. Dès les premiers soubresauts, vous avez tendu la main à la communauté européenne. Vous avez voulu être considéré comme un membre à part entière de cette famille, trop longtemps séparée. Aujourd'hui, ne le cachons pas, vous n'avez pas le sentiment que la famille est enfin véritablement réunie. Vous mesurez le chemin parcouru, mais vous êtes un peu déçu, un peu frustré. Je n'ai pas l'habitude de biaiser, de masquer les vrais problèmes par des discours lyriques. C'est tout Delors qui dit la vérité sans embellir la situation. On se rappelle qu'à l'impatience des pays de l'Europe centrale qui demandent dès 1990 un calendrier d'adhésion à la communauté, les leaders européens répondent par des tours de passe-passe, comme Mitterrand avec son idée de confédération, ou comme Kohl, Mitterrand ou Chirac, par la désinvolture, cela mettra des décennies. Delors répondent par l'admiration pour leur inébranlable volonté de retour à l'Europe et leur insistance à dire que l'Ouest devrait au plus vite s'acquitter de la dette de la trahison de Yalta. Et pour le prouver, ils créent des instruments pour accélérer le processus, pour atténuer l'amertume ressentie par ces nouvelles démocraties d'être tenues dans une salle d'attente. Ce sera le programme phare et d'autres instruments d'accompagnement. Laissons encore une fois Delors défendre lui-même son bilan. Cette solidarité, je cite, s'est manifestée avant même l'effondrement de l'Empire soviétique avec les programmes phares. Que dire de ce programme? Par la rapidité de sa mise en œuvre, par l'effort global qui fait que l'Union et ses États membres sont à l'origine des 3/4 de l'aide aux pays de l'Europe centrale et orientale, il est en soi un signe évident de solidarité. Que dire de son efficacité? Dit toujours Delors. Je connais bien les critiques sur ces consultants trop bien payés et pas toujours désirés qui venaient saturer le vol de Varsovie et les chambres de l'hôtel Marriott. Il y a certainement eu des excès, mais je constate que votre pays connaît à ce jour une des meilleures situations macroéconomiques d'Europe, dispose du secteur privé le plus important et peut-être le plus dynamique des pays de l'Europe centrale et orientale et bénéficie d'une population mieux formée aux règles de l'économie de marché. Et j'ai la faiblesse de croire qu'il le doit un peu à notre assistance technique. Remarquons que dans ce même discours de 1994, Delors encourage la coopération régionale et son expression institutionnelle que le groupe de Visegrad. Il est conscient des divisions internes et des perceptions différenciées, comme l'ultralibéralisme de Václav Klaus ou le populisme de Vladimir Miechar, mais il croit que cette association favorisera l'adhésion future des pays de l'Europe centrale en bon ordre. En 2007, Jacques Delors rencontrera un intellectuel polonais, Bronisław Geremek, dans un débat organisé à l'ambassade de Pologne à Paris. Dans son propos, il rappellera les 3 élargissements consécutifs de l'Union européenne, à la Grande-Bretagne, au Portugal et à l'Espagne, enfin aux pays de l'Europe centrale et orientale. Et il dira que ce dernier élargissement était pour lui un bonheur, en ajoutant, je cite, « Ces pays sont l'Europe comme nous ». Face à son ami historien Bronisław Geremek, il parlera de l'histoire, je cite à nouveau, « Je crois que la grandeur de l'Europe est d'avoir plus ou moins bien répondu aux défis de l'histoire. Considérant l'avenir, je pense que vers 2025, et nous y sommes, les historiens établiront l'Union européenne comme les grands faits historiques de ces 100 dernières années. Cependant, il me reste dans cet exposé rapide de mentionner le point qui concerne notre campus catholique. C'est pendant ce voyage de mai 1994 que Jacques Delors se rend sur le campus de Natolin. Pour être plus précis, ce campus est né un peu avant, grâce aux volontés des gouvernants polonais de cette époque, grâce aussi à Jerzy Łukaszewski.
Sorry to interrupt. If we could wrap up in the next few minutes, thank you.
Okay, I will finish. I am in the conclusion. Cela a donné à Jacques Delors l'occasion d'exprimer sa vision de la fonction de notre campus. Premièrement, Delors a souligné le rôle crucial de l'éducation dans la construction d'une Europe unie. Il a insisté sur le fait que la formation de futurs leaders européens était essentielle pour promouvoir la compréhension et la coopération entre les pays membres. Il a aussi mis l'accent sur le symbolisme du choix de Natolin en soulignant son importance historique et géopolitique en tant que lieu de rencontre entre l'Est et l'Ouest de l'Europe, surtout dans le contexte des changements survenus après la chute du communisme. Pour finir, il a lancé un appel à la promotion présente et aux futures promotions à s'engager activement dans la construction européenne en mettant en avant les valeurs de solidarité, de démocratie et de respect des droits de l'homme. Il reste la question de la perception de Jacques Delors, dont la sympathie pour le pays de l'Europe centrale était, comme on l'a vu, évidente. Pour cela, il suffit de citer, en conclusion, le mot prononcé par le ministre des Affaires étrangères polonais, Radosław Sikorski, après le décès de Delors. Je cite, « Sans l'héritage de Jacques Delors, il n'y aurait pas eu l'Europe unifiée, capable d'agir collectivement face à des puissants défis qu'il nous est venu d'affronter, comme niveler les disparités entre les pays membres de l'Union européenne, lutter contre la pandémie, offrir une aide résolue à l'Ukraine envahie par la Russie. Ce fut un grand Européen et c'est une très grande paix. Merci.
Merci, Professor Mink, and thank you, Professor Pastaline. I will now give the floor to colleagues in Bruges, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much for your participation, and I think we should just move on to the panel by the students, and then we have time in the end for questions for all panelists. Thank you very much again.
Good afternoon and welcome to this panel discussion on the legacy of Jacques Delors. My name is Erriketi TLA. I'm the Senior Academic Assistant of the Law Department, and I'm honored to co-chair this session alongside Paula ÁLVAREZ VIDAL, Academic Assistant in the Pol Department. Together, we have the privilege of moderating a conversation that brings fresh and interdisciplinary perspectives on one of Europe's most influential leaders. Jacques Delors was not just an architect of European integration. He was a visionary who understood that economics, politics, and social cohesion must go hand in hand to build a united and prosperous Europe. His leadership as President of the European Commission laid the groundwork for many of the structures that sometimes we take for granted today. That is why today's panel discussion is so special. We're hearing from a generation that has only ever known a Europe shaped by Delors' achievements. For many of our speakers, the euro has always been their currency. Borderless travel has always been a reality. They have benefited from Erasmus mobility, and generally the idea of a deeply integrated European Union was simply just a norm. But what does this mean for how they interpret Jacques Delors' legacy? Do they see his vision as fulfilled, or are there still challenges left unresolved? This panel will explore those questions from a range of disciplinary perspectives. We're looking forward to a rich discussion on what Delors' work means in today's world, through the eyes of a generation that has grown up with his legacy, and how these young voices see his ideas influencing the Europe they will shape in the years to come. Without further ado, let's begin. I'll now turn to Paula to introduce our speakers.
Thank you so much, Erriketi, for this brief but very fruitful and insightful introduction. So now I'm very excited, and it's my pleasure to introduce the brilliant panelists that we have here. Each of them will bring different perspectives, but I would like to mention that the representative of Natolin and Tirana campus that traveled all the way to be here. So thank you so much and welcome. Yes, so as I was saying before, all of them will bring a different perspective, of course, based on their different studies. But while reading the interventions, what I realized it was this kind of common share of urgency, and this is due to the challenging times we're living on. So I think it's very fruitful to have a debate. After their interventions, we will have a long Q&A session that you can please share your thoughts, debate, and let's try to engage. I know it's before dinner time, but it's 20 minutes that we can all enjoy. Now I'm gonna start introducing the panelists. So we have Isaline Van Sinai. She's from the Eco department, and she's gonna do a brief overview about the creation of the single market, the economic and the monetary union. But what I really like from her intervention is that she focused on the importance of social cohesion and solidarity. Then we will move on to Luis Acouf from the IRD department. He will focus on a need for youth engagement and for a Europe that is accessible for everyone. We will then continue with Arit Castro-Landazuri from the Law Department, who will basically speak about, as he mentioned, the favorite treaty of the law students, the Single European Act. But he will also speak about the initiative of Erasmus that have created and contributed to the creation of an European identity. Then we will continue with Han Baarden-Plasch from the Pol Department. He will examine the basically political trajectory of Delors, balancing his achievements, but also understanding his political trajectory in the context that we have been discussing during today. Then we will continue with Mina Milovic from the Tirana campus, and she will bring a very interesting vision
from the Western Balkans and on the need for cohesion and a united Europe. And finally, we will finish with Mathieu Roubat from the Natolin campus, which will highlight how the visions from Delors can be applied to today's challenges. So without further ado, I give the floor now to the panelists. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed professors and fellow students, it's 1988 and Europe stands at a crossroad. The European Economic Community, once a beacon of unity, is struggling. Economic divergence between member states are widening and the vision of a truly integrated Europe seems distant. Yet one man sees opportunities where others see obstacles. It might not surprise you, but I'm talking about Jacques Delors. As the newly appointed chairman of the Committee of the Study of Economics and Monetary Union, Delors sets out to reshape Europe's economic landscape. His mission is to propose specific steps towards an economic and monetary union, one that promises stability, growth, and prosperity for all member states. Delors begins crafting what will become the 1989 Report on Economic and Monetary Union. I have it here with me. It's one of the most influential documents in European history. Le succès de l'Europe dépend de sa capacité à assurer un équilibre entre les politiques économiques et monétaires, où la souveraineté nationale est harmonisée pour le bien commun des peuples européens. These words from Delors' report capture his vision. A Europe transcending narrow interest for the common good, where cooperation and shared responsibility take priority, without compromising on national sovereignty. Delors did not advocate mere for adjustments, but he wanted a transformation. He believed in removing barriers, harmonizing monetary policies, and eventually adopting a single currency. Under his leadership, the European monetary system was established, paving the way for the euro. Between 1999 and 2002, the euro area grew from 12 countries to what we know today as 20 countries using the euro. He famously said, "L'introduction d'une monnaie commune n'est pas seulement une question d'économie, c'est une question de politique. Il s'agit de rendre l'Europe véritablement unie." Thus, the European monetary system laid the foundation for monetary stability, helping lowering inflation from 9% in the early 1980s to 2% by 1999, and reducing exchange rate volatility. It allowed European nations to move closely together economically. But Delors didn't stop there. Recognizing Europe's need for a genuine internal market, he envisioned the European single market, where goods, services, capital, and people could move freely across borders. He once stated, "Un marché sans frontières intérieures est le cœur d'une Europe qui aura la force de concurrer au niveau mondial et de répondre aux attentes de ses citoyens." His vision led to the Single European Act, triggering the removal of trade barriers and fueling EU growth. By 1992, completion of the internal market boosted EU growth, or EU GDP, by 2%, good for 200 billion euros in the subsequent years. This transformation made the EU the world's largest trading bloc, accounting for 16.2% of global GDP by the early 2000s. The euro is one of the world's most traded currencies. However, let's not be foolish. Crisis after crisis, the euro has proven to be fragile. And without Mario Draghi's "whatever it takes" pledge in 2012, it might have collapsed. Delors laid the groundwork for a more integrated Europe, but his journey continues. segments of the single market hasn't been completed yet, such as digital services, energy, and transportation. This remains incomplete, and closing these gaps is essential for securing Europe's competitiveness and increasing in this increasing globalized world. A key initiative to boost Europe's growth and competitiveness is the Capital Markets Union. By strengthening the EU financial system, we can diversify funding sources for innovative startups and SMEs. A robust Capital Markets Union ensures high potential businesses that can tap into cross-border investments so that they can channel capital into R&D, support disruptive technologies and sustainable projects, and fortify the financial stability by reducing reliance on bank lending alone. Such steps will foster an environment where innovation thrives and every entrepreneur, from Bruges to Tirana to Natolin, can secure capital needed to transform ideas into global successes. Regarding Delors' speeches, I'm struck by his unwavering optimism and commitment to the European project. In times of skepticism, we sometimes miss that positive outlook. I believe that Europe's best days lie ahead if we stay unified and ambitious is very interesting to me, very inspiring. As we move forward, let's recall one last time Delors' words. L'Europe est notre destin commun et son succès sera mesuré par notre capacité de construire une union aussi forte dans sa cohésion sociale que dans sa puissance économique. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Isaline. It was really interesting. What I want to achieve with my contribution is not to give you a theoretical overview of Delors' achievements, because I'm convinced that you all know this way better than me. But I want to use these moments more to spread some awareness about how current generations perceive the European Union, and more especially the legacy of Delors. When I was asked like 2 weeks ago to participate in this conference, that question pushed me towards to some reflection. First of all, a reflection on who is Jacques Delors. And if I asked this question to my mom or dad, my grandfather or my grandmother, they would answer me, well, Louis, Delors, it's that person that made European Union into the EU we have today. Or they would answer, it's he who pushed the European integration forward. However, if you would ask this question to my friends, I can assure you that not even half of them know the answer. I would get answers such as, it's the French politician, or sorry, but I don't have an idea who it is. Nevertheless, a minority of my French would give the answer, well, Delors, wasn't it the former president of the European Commission? And however this answer is correct, they would not necessarily make the connection between him and the union we know today. What I want to say is that for our generation, the EU is not necessarily seen as a story of integration, and the EU is often perceived as an abstract notion, and more national politicians make use of this abstractness to blame the EU as a cause of national problems, just because some people just not understand the EU because of this abstractness. And this is sometimes in contrast with our perception here at college. We learn about the achievements of Jacques Delors, and in a certain way, we get the same passion as he to make the EU a project of integration. And that's totally normal, because during our periods here at the college, whether it is as student, AA, professor, or staff, we really wake up with the EU and we go to bed with the EU. Nevertheless, it's also here that a kind of risk arises, a risk to take Delors' legacy for granted and to assume that every generation shares the same interest and passion for these projects. And it's therefore that I want to use this moment to build a kind of bridge, because I'm convinced that many amongst us will at one day or another be in a position to not only participate in these fantastic European projects, but also will be in the power to change, improve, and guide the EU. Well, once you have this opportunity, I'm asking you to not take the EU for granted, nor Delors' legacy. Remain critical and keep challenging yourself. Challenge yourself to make European projects less abstract and more understandable and accessible for everyone. Explain to your friends and future generations what the EU really stands for, but more importantly, listen to friends and future generations. Listen to what they have to tell you and what they are really concerned about. And once you are in that position to shape the EU, use that position in such a way to make the Union more inclusive, more transparent, and more connected. What I want to say is that the European Union is not only like an economical project, and like also the professor said before, Delors was a kind of visionary, and the European is way much more than only that. It's like based on values, and the European Union has the power to invest in humanitarian aid, in peace facilitation, but a lot of people, they don't understand it. So really try to keep explaining that and show which beautiful the project of the European is to everyone. Okay, thank you very much. And I will give the word to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Louis. And also thanks to the EG department for organizing this conference. The lessons from Jacques Delors that we can learn are multiple, but if I have to take one, it would be the following. Comment faire entendre l'Europe si les jeunes ne voient pas en elle un projet collectif et une représentation de leur propre avenir? That is precisely what this conference is about how to involve our generation into a European project. The people, the citizens, were always at the core of Delors' thinking. And I think that just like Robert Schuman, one of the founding fathers of the Union, he thought that Europe would not be made all at once, but all through concrete achievements. And those concrete achievements would be felt by the European citizens as their own, in the hope to build a new transnational generation. That is actually putting the law at the service of the European citizens, which is, I think, how we approach law here at the college. And I believe that our generation has experienced the achievements of his presidency fully. So when I was asked to participate in this conference, I thought what my colleagues would think about what were the concrete achievements of Jacques Delors' presidency. And the first concrete achievement, and as a law student, one colleague could not help speaking about it, is what Delors considered his favorite treaty, the Single European Act. Signed in February 1986, the Act introduced a series of concrete achievements and planted the seed of something that was to become the single market. Free movement of goods, services, capitals, and persons was to be established by 1992 in what would turn true the dream of the founding fathers of the European Union, that is, a Europe without borders. Last week, during our study trip, we had the opportunity to meet Koen Lenaerts, the president of the Court of Justice, who told us about the limits to harmonization of the internal market and the true end to eurosclerosis that the Single European Act was. That was, of course, thanks to Delors' activeness. Today, more than 450 million citizens benefit from this, the embryo of a true transnational European generation of citizens. From the little but important detail of homologation of certificates to harmonization of asylum rules. But this is far from perfect, as the report by Mr. LETTA, who was with us here virtually today, highlighted, and it is up to our generation to complete it, as also Céline mentioned before. Another colleague very rightly told me that when talking about the Single European Act, we mostly tend to forget about something that completed also the single market, which is social Europe. The single market would not have become a reality without this, without social policy and structural funds. And these are very concrete steps that change the life of citizens. We're talking about the Working Time Directive, we're talking about the Social Charter, we're talking about the Social Protocol to the Maastricht Treaty. These achievements have shaped our generation, for it's thus that we're born already with these changes introduced and have lived this evolution. Second achievement in this step-by-step approach is also something that many EU citizens see every day and reminds them of the Europe shaped under President Delors. Although I was too young when the currency was introduced in my country, one colleague told me that in his country, this was actually the time where the citizens realized in the streets that Europe had changed their lives. They could now see the flag on the coins. In fact, not only him, my mom, who might not know much about Europe, when she every day buys her delicious Spanish coffee with milk with a €2 coin, she sees the flag, the stars on the flag. And the third step was truly a breakthrough, genuine attempt at creating a transnational generation, what Delors called the fifth freedom, the free circulation of ideas, or as the screwdriver of EU integration. That is what I realized when a colleague told me about a fantastic experience she had during her Erasmus. For her, it was the first time in such a close contact with other Europeans. And I believe that this program has created a true generation of transnational citizens. Since its creation in 1987, nearly 40 million young people have participated. 40 million young people that, like my colleague and also myself, have got into contact with different cultures, different languages, different people. Erasmus is in fact a message to us, to the young people that shape Europe. And by us, I'm not just referring to us as students at the College of Europe, but also as a European people. Because as Jacques Delors argued when talking about the Erasmus program, Europe is not, as it is sometimes portrayed, an abstract artificial entity, but rather a living, active community. A living community of which I may add, for part all of this in this room, but also outside this room. The European dream lives through the generations that actively contribute to each of those concrete achievements from their position, and if they might, also to the law that creates those achievements. Generations that in the end shape the European Union from Riga to Lisbon, from Stockholm to Nicosia, and also soon from Tirana to Natolin and Bruges. Our generation needs to live up to that spirit, and that is the best way, I think, to honor Jacques Delors' legacy. As he famously said, and although this might sound a bit awkward because we're in winter, be brave, take heart, the springtime of Europe is still ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arit, for that intervention. What can really be considered political success? Is it the association of a name with impressive political achievements? In that case, Jacques Delors was astoundingly impressive. As President von der Leyen said in her commencement address to our promotion in October, when Delors left office, Europe was making history, with a new political union, a new single market, and with membership rising from 9 to 15 and beyond. But is this not an attribution of success with the benefit of hindsight that does not rhyme with what Delors himself would have considered to be worthwhile political achievements? It is a cliché, but Delors took on the presidency of the Commission during a time of rapid change, just like our own. Delors was above all worried about the erosion of traditional social ties on the European continent under the pressure of American capitalism, whose force he has experienced firsthand as French Minister of Finance during the Tournant de la Rigueur. The worry was not simply that Europe would be left behind on a technological and economic level by countries such as the United States and Japan, but that the seduction of their economic model would lead to its adoption and the subsequent growth of individualism and atomization. Delors was therefore cautious in his support of the first major achievement with which his name is associated, the Single European Act of 1985, of which we heard. Despite its liberalizing impulse, it also marked a moment of unity in the community after the period of Eurosclerosis, raising the hope for future concerted actions on issues that Delors considered of real value, such as social policy. In his words, the competition which will be developed by the large market will also promote cooperation. Delors' early promotion of liberalization, embeddedness within the French Socialist Party, and Christian democratic roots also allowed him to foster constructive relationships with Mitterrand, Kohl, and Thatcher, the most important European leaders during his mandate. Their goodwill allowed him in 1989 to achieve one of his main objectives, the adoption of a Charter of the Fundamental Social Rights of the Worker, a document intended to align the rights of workers across the community countries. However, contrary to the Single European Act, adherence to the criteria of the Charter was voluntary, and subsequent legislative instruments adopted on its basis were mostly recommendations and opinions. Again, Delors would find more success in a project he was less wedded to, the European Monetary Union, or EMU. Contrary to its other intellectual architects, Delors did not see the EMU as an end in itself, but rather as a means to increase political cooperation across member states and put the European community on a firm financial footing to resist trends from the United States and Japan. Delors nevertheless considered EMU to only be a realistic goal if it foresaw a joint economic government across the Union that would promote economic convergence. Despite his close relations with Kohl, Delors was not able to avoid the gutting of this provision from his original plan. The Commission President went public with his criticism, calling the agreed-upon EMU a banker's Europe in front of the European Parliament. Delors poured his frustration into the White Paper on Growth, Competitiveness and Employment, published in 1993. In it, he sketched his ideas for a European Union capable of protecting what he considered most valuable, the European social model. Although it found a favorable reception, none of it was ever implemented because Delors proposed to finance its measures through joint borrowing. The Commission's president's last great push for his agenda foundered in member state intransigence, therefore. Was Delors' tenure therefore truly one of political successes? Or does it reveal the mistake we make when we lionize political figures? Perhaps it is always wise to remember, as Marx wrote, that men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. And Delors was no exception. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm coming from Tirana campus. It's really my pleasure to attend today's conference and share how we, the young people of Europe, view Jacques Delors' legacy. Jacques Delors has always inspired me because of his unwavering commitment to a united Europe, which encourages collaboration and mutual support. He was a staunch advocate for economic policies that not only integrated European countries, but also emphasized the interdependence and solidarity. Delors understood that individual states thrive when they contribute to and support one another. However, in today's public discourse, we see a concerning shift towards nationalism, where individual state interests overshadow the collective good, shift that undermines the spirit of cooperation that Delors championed. I'm originally from Montenegro, but I'm also a Croatian citizen. And over past 8 years, I've lived in 7 different countries, 4 of which are the EU member states. And this journey has given me kind of a unique lens through which to understand the complexities of European integration, but also firsthand experience what it means actually to be a European citizen. Currently, I'm pursuing my master's in European transformation and integration as part of the inaugural cohort at our new campus in Tirana. And this institution stands as testament to the ongoing commitment to Delors' vision of united Europe. In our classes, we have discussed Delors' legacy from economic, legal, and political perspective. And I can tell you that diversity of thoughts were overwhelming, positive, negative, critical, but still they all shared one common line. We all emphasize that we are interdependent on each other. We need to make sure that we share same values and protect what the Union has harvested until now. I know for many the topic is how to restructure the European Union and to make it more efficient and better, and that's something that we certainly need to do. On the other side, we still have parts of our continent that are striving to be member states and to become beneficiaries of Delors' policies that many European countries have done for decades now. Delors' vision of a single market, especially the freedom to move and work across borders, resonates deeply with citizens from the candidate countries. While he may not be the well-known figure among younger generations in the Balkans, the policies he implemented remain key reasons why many support joining the Union. They understand that access to a broader market is vital for personal and professional growth. But that comes with certain challenges. To address those challenges faced by Western Balkans, the EU has outlined the new growth plan designed to create a common regional market, and eventually integrate the Western Balkan economies into the single market. This plan focuses on enhancing regional cooperation, infrastructure development, and ensuring access to EU market, aiming to foster economic resilience and social cohesion, reflecting Delors' vision of united Europe where all regions thrive together. While I'm a bit skeptical about the implementation of the plan, given the current unbalanced foreign policy landscape in the Western Balkans, where not all countries are equally committed to EU integration, I believe it represents a modern approach to reviving some of the Jacques Delors policies from 30 years ago. The candidate countries in our region face domestic, political, and transnational hardships while striving for economic development and bit struggling with underutilized potential. By investing in projects that connect our economies and promote sustainable development, the EU can help bridge the gap between the candidate countries and the member states. In his own words, Delors said, I quote, "Cohesion is no matter of big business. It is above all desire to ensure that the community takes charge of reducing disparities between regions and between social groups," end of quote. This thought echoes profoundly in our current context, as I believe that we have a bit failed in this area, and there remains significant room for improvement, both in internal cohesion among the Balkan states, between the Balkans and the EU, and within the EU itself. The acknowledgement of disparities, both economic and social, between regions must be prioritized. And addressing these gaps is not merely an obligation, but also opportunity to ensure that every citizen can benefit from the European community equally. I urge our leaders, but also you, my fellow students who are future leaders of Europe, to keep in mind the importance of cohesion policy while you all work tomorrow on finding solutions to protect and strengthen the European market in this volatile geopolitical context. Thank you for the opportunity to share my insights, and I look forward for our discussion later.
Ladies and gentlemen, dobry wieczór, bonsoir. It is a great honor to speak today about the intergenerational perception of Jacques Delors' legacy and its limits in the contemporary context. Jacques Delors remains one of the most defining figures in European integration, leaving behind a vision that continues to inspire. However, as we reflect on his achievements, we must also acknowledge the challenge and constraints of applying his legacy to today's European landscape. For older generation, Delors embodied the golden era of European integration. His leadership as president of the European Commission saw the establishment of a single market, the foundation of the Economic and Monetary Union, and a commitment to social cohesion. To those who lived through this period, Delors represents an era of visionary leadership where pragmatism and idealism work hand in hand to create a stronger, more united Europe. His ability to reconcile economic competitiveness with social solidarity made European integration a source of hope and progress. For a younger generation, however, Delors' legacy is viewed through a more critical and nuanced lens. While his contributions are widely recognized, the Europe of today is vastly different from the one he helped shape. The challenge of climate change, digital transformation, security threat, and rising Euroscepticism call for a new approach. The economic model he championed, rooted in a balance between market liberalization and social protection, is under strain. The promise of a single market and the EMU have not translated into equal prosperity for all, leading some young Europeans to question whether Delors' vision is still viable in today's context. Moreover, some argue that the Delorian model of integration, based on incremental steps and consensus building, faces serious limitations in a world that demands swift and decisive action. Delors' method of advancing integration through functional spillover may no longer be sufficient to address the existential challenge the EU faces today. However, rather than discarding Delors' legacy, we must reinterpret it in a way that aligns with contemporary needs and constraints. His emphasis on solidarity, long-term vision, and the balance between economic growth and social justice should inspire us to craft new solutions that respond to today's pressing concerns. The challenge for our generation is to adapt and expand upon his idea, ensuring that the European project remains relevant, resilient, and capable of addressing the needs of all citizens. Earlier in the year, Monsieur Pascal Lamy came to the College of Europe in Natolin to give a memorial lecture on Jacques Delors. Like many of you know, he was the chief of staff and Sherpa of Delors during his time at the Commission. He explained that what distinguished Delors among his peers was his clear vision as president of the Commission, a vision built on social, economic, and later, environmental sustainability. Along with his vision, he had a method that we already talked about today, listening, sequencing, and communicating. The listening part of it was also described by Alain Duhamel as follows. Delors recherche le consensus, avance empiriquement mais sans relâche, imagine les mécanismes ingénieux qui permettent de progresser sans choquer ni heurter. At the end of Pascal Lamy's lecture, what struck me and some of my colleagues was how much the union has changed since Delors' time. A more diverse, vast, and complex union with more actors and stakeholders than ever complicates the effective transposition of Delors' method. Moreover, during Delors' time, the world was not at peace, but conflict and tension were incomparable to today's scale. The value upon which the international order was built post-Second World War were deeply rooted in leaders like Delors. When the Berlin Wall fell, it was seen as forever. The rise and victory of democratic value were considered permanent. Today, the notion that the European project is about peace and deeply rooted in democratic value are challenged by external and sometimes internal actors within the Union. I remember that Pascal Lamy finished his lecture by talking about the biggest transformation in the making for the EU, the need to add to the Delors vision of social, economical, and environmental sustainability, the new component of strategic security. For the past 20 years, most of the major crises that hit the Union and impacted its citizens came from outside. By increasing our own security and resilience capacity in every field, we will be able to better face crises in this increasingly polarized world. In conclusion, while Jacques Delors' legacy remains a guiding force for European integration, it is not immune to the evolving challenge of our time. The intergenerational dialogue on his contribution must be one of both reverence and constructive criticism. Jacques Delors defined himself as a pessimiste actif, saying « Le pessimisme m'empêche d'être content de moi-même, mais actif car rien ne peut me décourager ». We must take inspiration from his vision and wisdom while being bold enough to innovate and redefine Europe's path forward. Thank you.
Very much to all of you, and congratulations for managing your time so well. So we will now open the floor for questions. Sorry. So again, thanks again for managing your time so well. We will now open the floor to questions in case anyone from the audience has any questions, or in case you want to address questions at each other.
Thank you very much to all the speakers of today. I thought these were all very wonderful papers. I especially like, of course, the last panel also where the students came with their ideas and insights. And I was struck especially also by the fact that you mentioned that today's generations, younger generations, no longer sort of remember Delors or do not really realize why they are where they are today in the European Union. So I share your concern that we need to bring that to the younger generation, that knowledge of where we come from, and especially that it's not to be taken for granted, that we have to continue working, that it's dynamic, it's a construction which is never finished. And it's from that perspective that I would like to pick your brains a bit further and ask all of you to put yourselves in the position of Jacques Delors. If you were Jacques Delors today in the current geopolitical context, would you have any sort of screw-driving techniques to propose to us, the other Europeans? Do you have any suggestions how to go forward, having learned how Jacques Delors was going about things? I know it's a very difficult question. That's why I only dare to ask you. But of course, if the other speakers of today have insights, vous êtes aussi le très bienvenu pour répondre à cette question.
Well, to break the ice, I will jump in. On this question, there is, in my research, for this conference, but more broadly in general, I still believe that the different spillover effect that it championed at one point about the economic spillover or the functional spillover, that are still viable way of trying to create more union and integration and dependency between the member states. Personally, and after I will let you continue. Personally, I think one of the most complex, it's not an innovative thought that I'm going to say, but the fact that we have more actors and stakeholders, like I said briefly in my piece, is what complexify, in my view, the most our situation in comparison of the time of Delors. And it's much more complex to listen to everyone and to try to move forward with everyone when we are so many around the table.
If I may add to that, I think that's something that we can learn from Jacques Delors for today, is how he managed to have good relationships. I mean, not only with the political leaders, but also with the parliament. He was kind of, most of the time we think about the commission as the honest broker, right? But I think that he truly believed that, and he truly managed to be the honest broker. He was the negotiator for many things. He was always the one being consulted, as we were discussing before with Kohl and Mitterrand. And I think that maybe that right now doesn't happen a lot, or at least not that often. And I think that's something that we can learn from Jacques Delors. He was capable of yes, of reaching agreement with all those people, even if they were very different. He was even capable of convincing Margaret Thatcher that you cannot have trade liberalization if you do not have qualified majority voting in the council. So I think that's one of the main lessons that we can learn from his work.
I'm gonna tell you something. I think the important thing is the European Union, they act, but the problem is visibility and communication, like how to bring to the people what we are doing. And the European Union has so many competences and like so many institutions that it's sometimes so difficult to understand who is doing what. For example, like before coming to the college, I didn't really know in which way the European Union was acting in humanitarian aid of development coordination. And they are like super important actors there. So I think it's important to find a manner to show to the people that in which way or which manner the European Union is acting on fields like that, and to show people that the European Union is not only working on like economic concerns that is often perceived by people. I think so. They are like big international. They are a big international player. They have a lot of like diplomatic power, and I think it's important to show that also to the people and to find a way how to communicate it and to how make it visible to like everyone, I think.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think what he would be most worried about on the level of being able to act at a European level is the absence of a true political force for European integration at the present moment, since what was really key, for example, for getting Thatcher on board was having Krakshi, having Kohl and Mitterrand on his side and willing to push for more integration, with Kohl and Mitterrand really at that moment in time, a unique moment in time, pushing forward the European project. But if we look at current elections, if we look at projected elections, there is no real social momentum towards more European integration, and that constrains any European actor, no matter how motivated or how talented they would be.
I would maybe just quickly add that I think that sometimes what is communicated within the Brussels bubble doesn't really come out, and we should find some kind of communications channel where we reach nations and the younger generation a bit more. and that it doesn't stay concentrated within the Brussels bubbles.
Puisque la question était ouverte aux autres membres de panel, si j'étais Delors, aujourd'hui, j'essaierais de retrouver la culture de la collégialité à la Commission européenne. Et peut-être que si on voulait prendre un exemple plus précis pour faire un clin d'œil, je supprimerais le poste de vice-président exécutif, en considérant que le seul vice-président au sein de la Commission européenne, c'est le haut représentant, et qu'aujourd'hui, ce haut représentant, Madame la rectrice, vice-présidente de la Commission, il est relégué dans la hiérarchie de la Commission, et c'est en partie contraire au traité. Et deuxièmement, je rétablirais la culture et la pratique du multilinguisme au sein des institutions européennes.
Might have a comment on the answer to the question.
First of all, thank you very much for all the panels also after the coffee break. And I guess my question, a bit longer perhaps, tries to find some connections between the different contributions. And this also links back to the panel with Professor Marold and Professor Wessels earlier this afternoon on the question if Delors was a leader, if he really made a difference. And the point that Harm just made, that we had this kind of permissive consensus at the time. We had somehow a permissive indifference, at least, even if there were, for example, on the Thatcher side, really also obstacles that had to be overcome. There was just like kind of a very different environment, plus the optimism that came after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. So I would ask, would formulate my question as following to the panel members. Was it actually impossible to not become a great Commission president in the late 80s and early 90s? Would anyone who would be Commission president at the time just like use the room of maneuver and the optimism that was there at the time, in the same way as whoever was German Chancellor in 89, 90 would become a great German Chancellor because there was this window of opportunity for German reunification?
There is a fundamental question behind yours, that is whether we are all driven by constraints and circumstances, or whether we are free to choose and assume responsibility. I think this is a fundamental question which is always present in historical situations. It was the same question for Robert Schuman and Jean Monnet and Konrad Adenauer in 1950. There were constraints. European integration had to be launched. You can tell the story without mentioning the people, by only focusing on the conditions. But in the end, people had to do the thing. And they had the opportunity to miss their chance. So I feel that we must combine both aspects, driving structural factors, driving back and forth, not always in the same direction. And this is a history, a structural history of constraints and opportunities. But there is a history of personal freedom, of choice and responsibility too. This is not to say that everybody at every moment is free to choose everything. But in a given moment, you can seize the opportunity or you can miss it. And leadership, becoming a figure of history, means to seize these opportunities. It is not self-evident that all the opportunities are seized. The history is full of missed opportunities too. So I think
In the end, it's a philosophical question whether we are free as humans to choose or whether we are driven by circumstances and constraints. So I think there is no empirical answer to the question. It is too fundamental. So if you believe in human freedom, then you would have to say that in a given situation, individuals, persons, to speak in Jacques Delors' terminology, persons have a choice, not an unlimited one, but a choice, and they assume responsibility for choosing. If I may say so, this is the case for all of us, students and professors in our education and in our teaching. You choose what you will do with the education you get at the College of Europe, and you will choose the future for Europe. Sorry for these wise words and philosophical dimension.
I resisted the temptation to comment on the previous answer to the question, but I can't resist this one. I think I fully agree with you, and I think this is really a philosophical, fundamental question. But I would add, I don't know if it's an addition, or maybe it's just a different way of saying the same thing or viewing the same thing. I think that it's not only a matter of choice. Of course, you can have the structural conditions that can lead you in one direction, or actually can give you the options that might not be there in other historical conditions. So you have the freedom to choose, to decide to go in one direction, to try to do something. But there's also, allow me to go back to the screwdriver, the capacity to do it. So you have the freedom to choose, to decide to go in one direction, which requires a lot of, sometimes, conditions and also courage or vision that Delors for sure had. But also you have to know how to do it, because you can decide to go in that direction, but then fail, even if the structural conditions are there. And I think from what I understand and I know of him, I think that this was quite unique. The combination of these three factors, the conditions, the historical conditions that were there, that was probably not dependent on him, the capacity to see the direction and to take the decision to act in a certain direction, but also the technical capacity to push the right buttons or to put one after the other right steps. Also, some of you mentioned something that was very impressive to me, the capacity to build a consensus without, some of you use this word, without creating anxiety in some place. Who said that? One of the two of you. This capacity to act on fundamental historical decisions, probably without people around him even noticing that it was something so big. This sort of reassuring way of moving forward. But that requires a lot of technical capacity to understand how to build a policy. It's what Enrico was saying this morning. And for this, you need probably being here. I mean, you need to develop the knowledge, the capacity to act legally, institutionally, politically, socially, but the methodology comes with a lot of knowledge. So I think that there's also this additional element. You can have the structural conditions, you can have the decision, so the leadership to decide to go in one direction, but then you also need to have the knowledge on how to make it happen, and how to make it happen is not necessary. It's not only leadership, it's also hope what you acquire here. I couldn't resist that.
Yes.
Excuse me, I would also like to add something, and of course it's a bit unfortunate that I come after this philosophical pledge and our rector, but I just wanted to add that I read a lot of Delors speeches looking for quotes to incorporate in my speech, and I was really amazed by his optimism and the way he could put his vision into words. He is a great communicator, and I think he inspired a lot of people around him to really stand united. So Yeah, I just wanted to add this.
If it would be also possible for Professor Vinon to interact.
I just wanted to add to this that I mean, we've been looking at Jacques Delors. I talked about Jean Monnet earlier also, and Max Goldstam and all of this. But what's very important also is the network that they had. Without such network and the advice that the network gave to them, the close friends with, I guess, someone who spoke about the Monnet network, described as a circle of friends, these people would not have had the influence that they had, I think. That's very, very important. So for instance, when you look at Jacques Delors and the Single European Act, of course, it's very important for the Single European Act, but without, having been put in the place of the President of the European Commission, without having gotten the advice from Max Goldstam and others that, maybe he had this great idea, for advancement, in the security field, and also monetary field, but what would work at the time would be the Single European Act. Without this, maybe the law would not have gone as far. So it was the exchange, the fact that he had around him all these amazing people that also made his strength, as had been the case by Jean Monnet. So it's the team, it's the circle of friends that is so important. And the way that they were able to mobilize them somehow. So that's what I had to say here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Or you can ask questions to each other if you so wish. We still have a little bit of time.
I just want to thank you very much. All of your speeches were brilliant, really brilliant, and very, very positive, very positive. Take a lot of positives from what you said. I just want to add something. It's not really a question, but I can't prevent myself from recounting this little anecdote. In the seminar that I run at the LSE in London, where the rector kindly spoke a few years ago, one day we gathered together all the surviving members of Lord Cofield's cabinet, the Commissioner for the Internal Market, the architect of the white paper for the internal market. Well, he was the author of it. Anyway, they reminisced. All of them could do perfect imitations of Cofield, by the way, who had a very special way of talking. It was quite funny. But the former chef, Adrian Fortescue, had died. But they all said the same thing. Jacques Delors and Cofield got on so well because neither spoke the other's language. So they respected each other. But that meant that Pascal Lamy and Adrian Fortescue were the people who communicated on their behalves. So it was the two chefs de cabinet. And Pascal Lamy, this is silly detail, but he had spent all of his summers as a kid in the UK. So he spoke very good English. Adrian Fortescue, I'm not sure how good his French was. But anyway, they settled everything between their bosses before it ever got anywhere near the college. And that was also part of the Delors method, because as was being said before, he could gather around him these people that he trusted. I mean, and some of them were real warriors. François Lamoureux was not somebody you wanted to cross if you could avoid it. Pascal Lamy was, as Peter Sutherland described him, Delors' exocet. It was Lamy who went and spoke to other commissioners, with the exception of Léon Britton, who famously said to Lamy, if the president has something to say to me, he can say it to me himself. But so he had these people around him, the shock troops who went out there. And somewhere in the personalist magazine, Esprit, there is an essay by Pascal Lamy in which he explains that his president, Jacques Delors, is the philosopher prince, and it's his job to enable the prince, the philosopher prince, to think. and to protect him from all the sort of mundane, everyday business of managing a wily administration like the European Commission, and to let him get on with the big stuff. And indeed, what was said about the speeches, you said, I think, about his speeches, he had an extraordinary capacity to speak on his feet. I saw him so often in the European Parliament where he was responding to very lengthy debates. He would make sure that he responded to every single MEP's point, most of the time from memory. It was extraordinary to watch. He really had an extraordinary capacity of synthesis as well as of oratory. Voilà, that's a few reminiscences about a great man.
Okay, so I think this is it for today. Thank you so much for the audience for being here until this late. Thank you so much for our brilliant students. Really, it was a pleasure to work with you. So thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you to the rest of the speakers. It was a pleasure to having you here, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.